for public viewing. I'd like to welcome Karen Gray, the manager for the corporate FUD team, is here today along with her team, and Karen will introduce her team at item 5 to everybody in the chambers today. So welcome Karen and the team along. So we'll call for Sederin, and apologies please, Lynn.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Councillor Jones.
Present.
Councillor Cogley.
Present.
Councillor Richardson.
Present.
Councillor Canning.
Present, thanks.
Councillor Mabin.
Yeah, I'm here, thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Here.
Councillor Lennox.
Morning here.
Councillor Kyle.
Present.
Councillor Hogg.
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watts.
I'm present, Lynn.
Thank you. And Councillor Stewart.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? No. Okay. So the previous minutes for the meeting 12th of October, can we agree is an accurate minute? Yep, thank you. Is there any matters arising from that minute? No. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll head on to East Ayrshire Performs. It's a summary report by the Chief Financial Officer, and we have Joe online.
Chair, yeah.
Morning, Joe.
Good morning, Chair, and morning, members. The East Ayrshire Performs report today was considered and approved by Cabinet yesterday. And it's a report that builds on that earlier Q1 report to this committee, and more importantly to that medium-term financial strategy budget update report that I presented to Council a few weeks ago. The headlines from this report show an improving position in terms of our overall service projected overspends. And we're seeing that levels that were at £9.5 million of an overspend at Q1 has fallen to £7.2 million in this report, achieved through the hard work of services and budget holders across the council. And I'm grateful to colleagues and the members for that good work. But of that £7 million, around £4 million relates to projected overspends within health and social care, being well trailed, members, and you know from the previous report that a financial recovery plan that's required as part of the integration scheme is being compiled. It's nearing completion, in fact, and that will be presented to the Integration Joint Board in the first instance in the coming weeks. And the purpose of that recovery report is to bring the budget back into line wherever possible and to highlight the Paragraph 9 shows the expenditure reduction measures, the cuts that you approved as part of Council in February this year. The total was around £7 million, and you can see in today's report that there are 3 entries, and they total £171, so they're minor and not very material in terms of the larger scale of things. But it just gives you and gives this committee some reassurance around the work that Julie, Colin and the team do around not just banking those cuts at February, but we walk them and progress them through the year. And so 3 are there today. They are shown as red at this point in time. Budget holders believe that they are unlikely at this point in time to be achieved. However, part of that process and opportunities within the overall budget that they have to absorb those this year with a plan to bring them back online next year. And suppose paragraph 10 is the key report. That's where we start talking about the revenue budget, and we're moving slightly on from that Q1 report, but we're noting here that education is projected to end the year about £4 million overspent, a slight improvement since Q1. You know that this is predominantly due to 2 things. It's due to pressures within the early years budget, and it's also to do, more importantly, with a significant overspend within special education, and the majority of that is within special education transport. You know as well from previous reports and from discussions I've had with you that officers within that service are finalising 2 reviews, one for early years and one for special education, which supported by colleagues elsewhere, including the Improvement Service, will see 2 reports presented to CMT in the coming week or so, to be considered by CMT, and thereafter being reviewed and challenged at CMT and then presented to members. Within communities and economy, the services there are projected to have an anticipated overspend report when they were anticipated to overspend by around £1.3 million. We're seeing pressure within Ayrshire Roads Alliance related to education and transport costs for primary and reviews to reduce these waste management with housing communities is underway, with proposals being brought to CMT and of course to you and to members. Just to highlight that in terms of that waste review, what started off as a fairly, I use the word simple, but I don't mean simple, but simple review has become much more complex quite greatly, and so officers are taking the opportunity to delve deeper into that service, and it is likely that rather than a complete review being presented to members in early course, it will be stepped, with a final review taking place later next year. In the Q2 report also takes the opportunity to review the capital programme, and paragraph 16 notes the rephasing of this year's capital programme. It's nothing new, it happens at this time each year. And what it will do is it will see that the planned projects this year that we had planned to spend around £50 million in capital will now be £39 million. And that's shown in the table at paragraph 18. It's important that I update the committee today on a piece of news that came out after papers were issued, and that's to do with the Council's bid to the Learning Education Investment Programme 3, the Learning Estates Investment Programme 3 programme, and the notification that we received informing us that we had been unsuccessful on our bid for the North West Kilmarnock, and now that this is the case, then a wider piece of work examining education need, looking at funding, and also looking at population demographic. It will all feature in this review, and members, the other sections in this report are taken in more detail in the accompanying report, but Chair, I'm happy to stop there and take any questions that committee members may have.
Okay, thanks very much, Joe. Does anybody have any questions at this point for Joe? Councillor Stewart and then Councillor Davidson.
Joe, it's on obviously St Sophia's and Doon Academy on the capital programmes. Where are we sitting with them just now? Because obviously they're both over, and Doon Academy's sitting, hasn't went to planning. There's problems with SEPA and MPF4 that needs to be looked at, and I reckon we're £10 million under budget for that. So where are we going to get the funding for that? The other one is extremely disappointing, the ministerial announcement on LEIP 3. But whilst we were applying for that, did we know that if we were successful with 1 and 2, would we not hit the criteria for 3? And if we weren't successful with that as our grounds for appeal, was that not the criteria? Did we know that 1 and 2, if we were successful for that we wouldn't be able to go for 3, or as there grounds for appeal on that? As North West Kilmarnock is an area of growth, and this is going to be hard hitting to the people of that area. So where do we sit with all this? Thanks.
Chair, I'm very conscious that Andrew is in the room, but if I can maybe just give a general response around St Sophia's and Doon. So St Sophia's Cabinet approved an additional allocation to that project, I think a couple of weeks ago, and that now sees St Sophia's moving to the next stage and moving to construction. In terms of Doon, it's becoming a challenge in terms of trying to maintain costs within the available funding, and colleagues are endeavouring to do so, but a much wider review will take place given the challenges around the funding and also around MPF 4. In terms of LEAP 3, in our notification that we'd been unsuccessful, we had received details that the bid was competent. It was a really good bid, and that it met the criteria for the third round of LEAP. What the notification then did say was that because of the prioritisation of other projects that were successful, then they were given the award. There was a reference to East Ayrshire having received money in the LEAP 2 round, but that was not a reason why we didn't get LEAP 3. It was more a case of that there were others in the chain ahead of us that were deemed to require the funding more than us. Really unfortunate, quite unhappy about it. But be assured, members, that the bid that was submitted was competent and met the criteria and was classified as a good bid in the letter. I don't believe there's grounds for appeal, Councillor Stewart, but I'm maybe stop there, Chair, with your approval, and perhaps if Andrew would like to say more, then I'll pass through you.
Okay. Andrew, you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be fair, I think Joe's said pretty much everything. I mean, probably the one thing I would add is maybe just around the discussions in phase 2. And I think part of the reason the Scottish Government have probably slimmed down where they are looking to fund phase 3 projects is because of the pressures in phase 2 as well. So we did take a paper to Cabinet a couple of weeks ago, as Joe said, about St Sophia's, and we're progressing that. So we had anticipated that we would probably get about £1.8 million from the Scottish Government on the funding model. We have ended up getting 4.2. And again, we're still in those discussions on Doon campus just now with Scottish Government. We've actually got a meeting this afternoon to look at some of the abnormal areas. They also have agreed at a national level they will be taking another report to the LEAP board, probably before Christmas, I think. And part of that is to consider the inflationary pressures on the programme, and particularly the phase 1 and 2 projects. So I do still anticipate there will still be some further discussions on the budget pressures that we've got with Scottish Government. And again, we are progressing issues around the planning application. As you say, that there has been challenges there around NPF 4, SEPA, etc. But we think we kind of probably been a reasonably good place to take that forward still as well.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. David, do you want to come in?
Yeah, it was just to confirm through you, Chair, that the contract for St Sophia's was awarded yesterday to Flemings Limited. So following the Cabinet decision on the funding, members will recall the tender had already been received and was being held. So hence the quick conclusion there following the last Cabinet decision. So St Sophia's is now moving to construction as of yesterday.
Yeah, that'll be good news for the people feeding into St Sophia's. Councillor Stewart, would you like to come in?
Just to come back in, as local member for the Doon Valley area, and I'm sure Councillor Hogg and Councillor Filson will be weigh me on this. And could we be kept informed about Doon Academy, because day in, day out we're on the streets and people are asking us. I know that we want to begin any information away that's not right, but I think it would be better for us if we knew what was happening and we weren't hearing this at meetings, especially on the build, because we've had all the consultation, we've had all the problems with the local community, we've got them on side, and now they're saying, when is this thing getting built? So just, I mean, I know it's confidential, and there'll be things that you can't share with us, but it would really be quite nice to know where we are on the matters that are arising for this build. Thanks.
Richard, do you want to?
Yeah, happy to do that. Obviously, we'll try to kind of keep members and obviously the local community through the shadow board as up to date as we can. But clearly there are external pressures here that are out with our control at the moment, which is obviously extending the time. But yeah, happy to provide some further information.
Thanks, Andrew. Councillor Hogg? Oh, sorry, Councillor Richards. Sorry, Councillor Hogg. Councillor Richardson first, and then yourself.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lillian.
probably to Joe and to Andrew. Obviously, as a Ward 2 elected member, one thing Mount Carmel and Hillhead could all do with some improvements, to be honest. I mean, they're all good schools. They're all really good primary schools, but the actual fabric of the buildings, etc. I mean, I know I've had to get in touch recently with getting leaky roofs sorted on Thank and the rear entrance and exit sorted at Hillhead. But obviously, we might not be able to do the deep retrofits, etc. that the Scottish government money was going to help us do. But Joe mentioned a review. When will that review start, and when will we know what we can do for those 3 primary schools through East Ayrshire's own funding models?
Joe, do you want to come in that, or is it better for Andrew?
I'm happy to come in at the start, Chair, and maybe pass across to Andrew. So, you know that even had that funding been received, that there was always the plan from officers to review the capital programme, and that was because of the pressures being experienced across the entire programme around tender returns, supply chain issues and the like. And you know, you had capped, quite rightly, you had capped the capital programme at 8% of the council's net revenue stream in February, and so it makes that list of projects that's within that financial envelope really challenging now. And so that review of the programme and that prioritisation review of the programme was important. It's something that is in early stage. Supporting Andrew and the team in earnest, tying that in and bringing that back to members as we get towards the budget process. But that wider review is important because in setting that cap, then you've essentially said that the funding that you've set aside is, while it was £249 million, then it's going to be a challenge to fit the projects within that. So that review is in early stages, but it will begin in earnest now. I'm happy, Chair, to maybe stop there. I understand that I'm cutting in and out, Chair, so forgive me. I'll turn the camera off and maybe invite through you Andrew, who wants to expand any more.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, so Richard, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Richardson. So, yeah, just to reaffirm Joe's position, and Andrew mentioned earlier, we're meeting this afternoon as officers to commence that process. We've got a capital oversight strategic planning group next week. So, recognising the importance of the matters that need to be addressed as a consequence of us being where we now are, that work will commence immediately from officers. And as Joe says, the background is obviously the backstop is the budget. So between now and then, we'll clearly need to come back to members as soon as possible with any implications in terms of where we are with that budget. And I'm happy to commit to that through you, Chair.
Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. No, if that's great. When the review kicks off and when things start to happen, I know you'll be speaking to the heads of the schools and the parent councils, etc., and getting them involved as well. But just to ask again that myself, Councillor Cowan, Councillor Mackay as well, the 3 Ward 2 councillors, if we can be kept up to date with what's happening and involved as well. Obviously, I mean, there's real pressures. I mean, on Thank, there's a new unit in there for additional supports needs kids, and I think they were expecting 30 children at the outset. They've got closer to 40. So there's Hillhead's slightly different. Hillhead, I believe from speaking to the head teacher at Hillhead, there's actually capacity for more kids at Hillhead. So each of the 3 schools is different and all of their different needs, but it would be good to know what we can do from our own resources and when we'll be able to do it. So all I would ask that the 3 ward councillors, not just myself, be kept in the loop and up to date with what's happening.
I'm sure that's absolutely fine, Councillor Richardson, and that'll happen. Councillor Hogg, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Good morning. I just want to hark back to my colleague, Councillor Stewart there with the Doon Valley campus. This was news to me reading this paper that the project flood risk is unlikely to be resolved. I haven't heard this, so this was quite a surprise reading this in the papers that were brought forward, and slightly disappointing that as local councillors that we weren't aware of this or being brought up to speed. So to reiterate what my colleague has said for the Doon Valley, it's an important project for the area. As we know, education is key, and we want our education facilities to be 21st century and not what they currently are at Doon. So I would please ask that our officers do keep the elected members up to speed so that we can give informed feedback to our constituents, please, if that's possible. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hogg. That's a very good point, and I'm sure that will be taken forward in the future. Okay. Does anybody else have any points they want to raise with Joe? No? Okay. Joe, do you want to go on to the alternative delivery?
Sorry, Chair, with your approval, we're just going to start at page 20 and just go quickly through the service reports in more detail. And just noting that education, that £4 million underspend, around £1 million of that is in early years and 2.4 within additional support for learning. Within that 2.4, £1.5 million of that relates to transport costs, and that review is underway. Within finance, IT, governance, corporate support and people and culture, then we've got spends in these services predominantly due to the service review that Cabinet approved in previous months, and it's those service reviews that have now been reviewed and approved have been actioned, and now the recruitment to those posts is in place, and that's what's mainly leading to the overspend, the underspends that's taking place, but that will diminish as the staff are recruited and brought online. Page 1 takes us to communities and economy and draw your attention to housing and communities, an overspend of around £750,000 predominantly due to additional expenditure within waste, but noting that the head of housing and communities has taken the opportunity to identify underspends elsewhere to bring overspend down to this level that's in the report today. As I said, of that waste management has begun. It's complex, takes some time to conclude, and the head of housing and communities will provide regular updates to CMT and to members as that review progresses. And within wellbeing, page 22, we see that significant budget pressure across the whole services there, highlighting that the cessation of the COVID recovery funding from Scottish Government continues to impact on the many strands within this service. Overspend in children and families of around £800,000 due to additional pressures within support services and fostering and kinship. However, it's within community care where we see the largest spend of around £3.5 million, with significant financial pressures within older services and learning and physical disabilities. It's anticipated that Craig, the managers, will attempt to utilise previous balances that they hold to offset these costs this year. And further information will be contained in that financial recovery plan I spoke about that will be approved by the IGIB. However, what the report does show and what it does highlight is the service under strain. And consequently, colleagues will be reviewing not just the earmarked balances, but also reviewing service provision overall to try and recover the budget on a sustained basis going forward. And within the housing revenue account, page 24, and we know that COVID hit this account hard because of the restrictions meant works couldn't be done, and when work's not done, then we tend to underspend in material costs, but we also lose income too. And so we can see that there's an underspend there of around £145,000. But within that, we can see that housing management is expected to every year about £700,000 under budget due to additional rent income, due to the of demolitions, also new house building, together with lower costs on void rent loss. These have been offset, however, by a host of other pressures. So within housing asset services, we see this element of the housing revenue account expected to end the year 600,000 budget due to reduced housing investment programme income due to those delays and also overspends in materials because of supply chain and issues, and also overspends in transport costs. So that essentially is the services, Chair and members. It's a position that shows, services managing against significant strain and significant pressure, but in doing that, they have, taken steps to bring things back online. The position today is far better than it was at quarter one rather. Chair, with your approval, I'll stop there before going to alternative delivery models.
That's fine, Joe. Thanks. No questions? No. Okay, Joe, just carry on. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we begin again on page 26, and this section, as you know, members, covers two entities: Ayrshire Roads Alliance, revenue and capital budgets, and also the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust. And beginning with Ayrshire Roads Alliance, we can see that it's anticipated to end the year £700,000 under budget, with the majority of that underspend taking place within the strategic delivery element. And members, that's of delays in filling vacancies, and it's important to note that it's not in most cases a conscious decision not to fill. It's just that for some posts in the council, in Roads Alliance, in my own service and elsewhere, we're finding it very tricky, really difficult to recruit staff. In the local delivery element for Ayrshire Council, there's underspend of £1,000, and that's for East Ayrshire part. And we can see that that's due to vacant posts and also around a £700,000 reduction in road maintenance programme. £350,000 in road maintenance programme, offset by loss of parking income. And it's important also to note here that this is a service that's absorbing the costs of primary and secondary transport. Another review that's taking place, Chair, and which will be brought before members in the coming weeks. On the capital section, we can see expenditure in terms of bridges and road and significant projects, including the new Cumnock flood scheme. Construction works are complete, but we note that in the earlier East Ayrshire performance report in quarter one, that work in relation to the claim from the contractor is being progressed by colleagues in the council, supporting colleagues where appropriate. In the bus station improvements, we note that phase 3 works has started early this year. There have been some delays due to material shortages, but funding for this has been approved and allocated to us by ST. In terms of road surfacing, we can see that timber transport funding has been awarded by Scottish Forestry for 3 sections of the A70 at Oldtree, Lugar and at Muirkirk. And moving on to East Ayrshire Leisure Trust, page 28, we see that it's at the end of the year slightly under budget, with underspends in a number of areas as management seek to manage the overall funding envelope. And that almost break-even position is especially helpful here, given that wider review of leisure and culture services. I'm happy to stop there, Chair, before moving on to Treasury.
Okay, Joe, you just kind of dropped out for the last 10 seconds there. Don't know if you want to just maybe reiterate what you said, but we've missed. Colin, you want to pick that up?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think Joe was just making note of the fact that there's a wider leisure and cultural services review that's been undertaken by the Deputy Chief Executive. So that was just the kind of final comments there.
Thanks, Colin. Okay, does anybody have any questions at this point for Joe? No. Okay, Joe. go back across to Colin.
I'll do my best. So moving on to the Treasury on page 30, we can see that there's a total debt of about £414 million. Around 85% of this is with the Public Works Loans Board, and around 50 million. I'll keep going. 50 million from the money market institutions and 50 million from short-term borrowing from other local authorities. At this point, we have total investments of around £12 million being actively managed. This is a reduction of about 12 million since the previous report, and that's because 2 market loans totalling around 17 million were subject to lenders exercising options to increase the rate of interest. These loans have been repaid and new short-term borrowing has been taken to replace these and maintain our cash flow levels. In relation to the capital and other sections, business briefings begins on page 48 and contains a number of indicators that services would like to draw to your attention. In terms of the first set, we can see benefits processing is on target, but we're very conscious of the additional pressure being faced in the service through increased council tax reduction applications and as the service plans for the implications arising from DWP's managed migration project, which, although not impacting in East Ayrshire yet, will likely cause an initial deterioration in the statistics as we support claimants' move to universal credit. Within housing and communities, we can see really positive performance around the percentage of new tenancies sustained and also in terms of rent loss due to properties being empty. It's also heartening to see that the current tenant rent arrears as a percentage of the gross amount of rent due is below target, which is testimony to the hard work of the team given the pressures facing communities. We can also see in the bottom of the table employability indicators which show businesses supported to create new jobs, as well as the apprenticeships given opportunities within local businesses as part of the Council's Jobs and Training Fund. And within wellbeing, we can see the usual indicators noting that the standard hospital delayed discharge is still at 0, with narrative provided around delayed discharge bed days and information around the number of looked after and accommodated children highlighted. Complaints begin on page 54 and show that 36 complaints were received with a further 7 carried forward, slightly up from the same quarter last year. The performance for these complaints in terms of stage 1 and stage 2 and the time taken to determine complaints is shown, and on the bottom of page 49 we can see that of those 36 complaints, 17 had improvement actions associated with them, and services are actively taking forward these improvement actions in order to improve service delivery and overall complaints handling. The risks begin on page 57, and the corporate risk register was reviewed by CMT on the 25th of October. And for this Q2 report, no new risks have been added, nor have any risks had their priority status changed. In terms of the economic climate, the risk register notes that the budget report was presented to Council last week. We are working to close a £7 million structural gap, and we anticipate that further information will be provided as part of the autumn statement later this month, and more importantly as part of the Scottish budget, which has been confirmed to take place on the 19th of December. We are also noting in risk 1B that income levels, particularly around parking, are taking some time to recover, but we recognise the good work that colleagues are doing to try and recover income levels. Within the impact on our local communities, we're seeing an increase in council tax reduction, but more recently we're seeing a sustained pressure on crisis grants. And even after the injection of additional budget that Cabinet approved recently, it's likely that the priority level will have to be reviewed in the not too distant future. In terms of risk 2B, Ayrshire Growth Deal, this notes that the work to assess the wider capital projects is ongoing, and positive meetings have been held with both the UK and Scottish Government colleagues to set out the financial challenges that impact on the 16 capital projects, with officers across the region working on providing details of what can be achieved for each project within the available financial envelope. Chair, happy to stop there, noting that the recommendations for Governance and Scrutiny Committee are on page 11 at paragraph 3, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Colin. Are there any questions or comments for Colin at this point? None? Okay. Colin, thanks very much. And thanks to you, Joe, if you can hear us. Thank you.
Chair, I can hear you, and sorry again.
No problem, Joe. Just your IT problems. Okay, so we'll move across to the capital programme, and that's Simon Bell. Thank you. Morning, Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. Capital programmes continuing to make steady progress. However, as has been discussed earlier, it's facing significant challenges due to the current economic climate. As usual, without going through the report in great detail, if I could provide you with an update on a selection of projects in relation to their stage of development. Starting with completed projects and some good news. Both the Crosshouse and Netherthorpe primary schools have been shortlisted for Learning Places Scotland Awards, and the winners will be announced next Tuesday. There's approximately £27 million of construction contracts currently on site, including the new build Dunlop Early Childhood Centre, which is now wind and watertight. The final phase of works at Kilmarnock Bus Station, which has encountered some material supply issues, and the SHIP programme developments at Kennedy Drive, Kilmarnock and Kilmarnock Road, Mauchline, with works progressing well at both those sites. Projects at detailed design stage include the Galston office project and the Innerfit refurbishment of St Sophia's, where contracts have been awarded for both those projects, and pre-start meetings have been arranged with the contractors to allow agreement on site start dates for those. A planning application has been finalised for the extension and refurbishment of Student Academy, with tender documents starting to be prepared thereafter. And with projects in the earlier stages of development, we have the Cultural Kilmarnock project, where design development recommenced in August, following agreement of programme delivery timescales with the main project funders. The Ayrshire Innovation Park at Moorfield, as part of the Ayrshire Growth Deal, where consultation events have been undertaken as part of the pre-application process for outline planning consent, with very positive feedback. And the Galleon Centre, where the external design team are currently finalising the REBA Stage 1 report and proposals that covers a range of options. So thanks, Chair. That's just a brief update on some of the projects. Happy to answer any questions on those or indeed any others. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, so Councillor Coakley.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Simon. And Ward 6 councillors will be delighted with the update in relation to St Sophia's and to the town chambers in Galston. As far as St Sophia's is concerned, have the building works actually commenced yet? Thank you.
No, just to confirm, as I said earlier, that the contract was awarded yesterday. So the contract was issued yesterday following the legal standstill period. There's always a period of time to mobilise on site. So there will be an agreed start date, but as I say, they take a period of time. That's them now got the contract yesterday, and I would expect them on site within a few weeks, but Simon might have a specific date.
Yeah, thanks through you, Chair. Similar position with both Galston and St Sophia's contracts recently awarded. We still have to have those pre-start meetings with the contractor where we can discuss and agree the likely timescales for starting the contract. There is, as David has said, a lead-in period that the contractor needs to mobilise his workforce, subcontractors, materials and things. I think it's worth saying that, you know, realistically we are getting close to Christmas just now, and it might be with both those projects that a meaningful site start might be in the new year. But as I say, we still need to have that discussion and agreement with the contractors on that.
Thank you. Of course, the additional pressure in relation to the school is that the children have been decanted elsewhere. So it's, I guess, the sooner it's started, the better, as far as the school is concerned. Thank you.
Councillor Lennox.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, Simon. Thanks for the update. It was just in regard to the development in Kilmarnock Road, Mauchline. It's my understanding that that development is likely to be completed ahead of schedule. Could you confirm that's the case, please?
Yeah, thanks through you, Chair. Yeah, we're hopeful that we'll get that completed this side of the year. Contractors pushing hard to get the final works completed, and we'll keep members advised on progress with that.
That's good, thanks, Simon. Are there any other questions or points for Simon? Councillor Stewart.
I'm just back at Doon Academy again. CPAT and MPF4 are kind of holding this back a wee bit. Why did the architects no fin this out at the very beginning? Because, I mean, I live in Demelton, I know there's mine shafts and there's flood risks, and we all sit in the kind of the river that runs through it. But why Why did they no project that this MPF4 was going to cause problems before we went to this stage, before we got to this stage, Emma?
Yeah, thanks through you, Chair. Yeah, MPF4 came into place earlier this year, around about March time, I think it was. The consultants had been and have been designing for the impacts of flooding in the area and as part of the process of design development, and were aware of the consultation and implications that NPF4 might bring. NPF4 introduces an additional flood risk around about climate change. You know, I suppose in simple terms, the design criteria around about the previous NPF policy was a 1 in 200 year event. It now introduces, with climate change, in effect, what could be a 1 in 1,000 year event. So consultants were aware of what that might mean, but with any legislation that's there, be it building standards, they have to design to, you know, what the current legislation is, because future guessing what the changes might be would just introduce more complex design and more cost. So we have introduced those measures to address the design to try and compensate for the implications of NPF4, which has introduced additional cost and complexity to the design. It hasn't taken particularly long to introduce those changes, but what has taken the time is our negotiations with SEPA to try and reach some agreement that what we are proposing would be acceptable to them. We're almost there. You know, the implications of this development actually, on balance, improve the flooding risk and impact for the area around about the development. There are 1 or 2 areas which are marginally detrimentally affected by it, by a very small margin, and that's the sticking point with SEPA just now that we're trying to work through. If it's unable to work through, we still feel we have a strong position to take the project forward through the planning process. I hope that gives an explanation. Thanks.
Thanks, Simon. Councillor Stewart, you happy with that?
No, so it might be the case that SEPA Walney years ago ahead to build a school, and if that was the case, where would we be? Would we not be building it, or would we be looking at a different site, or is that what we're saying?
I'm going to bring David in for this one.
Yeah, I think just to be absolutely clear, as Simon said, colleagues have been mindful in NPF4 it didn't just drop out the sky in March. However, the final version of it was only issued in March. And as Simon said, the issue hasn't been then proofing or reviewing the proposed design to fully comply with the settled position in NPF4. That work took place, but it didn't take much because they were already mindful of what the options might be. The sticking point isn't compliance with NPF4 in the view of the council. The sticking point is that SEPA aren't prepared to accept the council's enhanced or revised proposals, but they are working, as you've heard, and it is still possible that SEPA may come to the view. I think that reflects the fact that NPF4 is new, it's big, it's complex, it's ambitious, and it has its own challenges. And all public bodies involved in the determination of the planning process, etc., are still coming to terms with it. So it's not for me to say that one particular body is maybe overcautious or over nervous about it, but whatever their position, it's our function to persuade SEPA of the merits of our proposal, as Simon said, that in fact it would actually overall enhance the flood mitigation measures or reduce the flood risk in terms of the overall proposals. So there's 2 options. One, we persuade SEPA to withdraw the objection because they're comfortable with it and for no other reason, because everything on its merits. Or 2, if they maintain their objection, we will, and we are just about, I'm actually, as an aside, in discussion with colleagues on both sides of planning to see if we can second a planner across from development management in accordance with all professional requirements and maintain Chinese walls, but basically to support the planning application process rather than continue to pay external consultants for that. So the planning application will be put in, it will be determined here, but if we put ourselves in a position of approving a council application against a statutory objection, it would automatically be called in. and it'd then be up to the Scottish ministers to determine whether or not the SEPA objection is so well founded they should refuse, or whether the SEPA objection can be met either by any conditioning we propose or any additional condition they might propose. So there's a number of possible outcomes at the moment, but the much preferred one is obviously that at stage one, if we can persuade, if we believe in the merits, you would hope we could persuade SEPA of the merits. But that it's not just about people being obtuse or difficult, it's about different bodies coming to terms with the weight and the complex detail of MPF4, and maybe some taking a wee bit longer than others. But we believe, and Simon's confirmed, we believe in the merits of the position we've got, and it's, if we can't persuade SEPA, then we have the opportunity. We're not a council that tilts at windmills and pursues lost causes, but we will pursue that which we believe has merit.
Thanks, David. Okay, Councillor Richardson, did you want to come in? All right, okay, no problem. Okay, Simon, thanks very much for that. Thank you. So we'll move across to people and Amanda.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, members. The people pages start on page 36 with the statistics for absence being on page 37. Noting that there were more employees absent in the same period as last year, but with less work days lost, which resulted in a reduction of 0.3 work days lost compared to the same period last year. Just also note that tables 2 and 3, due to the number of employees being counted, which could be multiple times as individual employees might be off more than once in the period, the figures do not match the figures in table 1. On page 38, our occupational health activity is detailed, and noting that the occupational health appointments, early intervention and physio appointments are all up on the same period last year. At the bottom of page 38 is the disciplinary activity, noting that there was 5 outcomes of other and 1 still under consideration, just with means of clarification and update. Of the 5 other, 4 individuals resigned just prior to their disciplinary hearing, and 1 individual's hearing was rescheduled to obtain further information. That's now taken place and resulted in a written warning. There is also 1 grievance that was concluded at stage 3, and at the time of writing the report, there was 1 ongoing case which has now been concluded and was not upheld. On page 39, members will note that the headcount for the period across the council has reduced, with the biggest reduction being the temporary staff within education, which is mainly due to the summer holiday period. Also note that both the headcount for full-time equivalent, the headcount and the full-time equivalent has increased for our permanent employees and decreased for temporary employees. On page 40, developing our young workforce, note that there has been a decrease in the total number of young people by 10, but that the modern apprentices has risen from 97 to 116 over the last quarter. There's also details there of 23 leavers, aged 24 and below. The main reasons for these leavers are positive outcomes, and that's with them obtaining a permanent job out with the council, returning to university or further training. On page 40, you'll see the breakdown of Jobs and Training Fund, which was previously requested, and it details the number of and the types of trainees across the council, with the 200 places being available for the period April 22 to March 25. At the end of this period, there were 117 trainees, which includes modern apprentices, graduate apprentices and graduate interns. Whilst the overall number has increased, the number of graduate interns has decreased, but note that this is because they've been successful in moving on to permanent employment or further pathways. The recruitment update is detailed on page 40. We continue to have, as has already been mentioned, hard-to-fill posts. These continue to be within the health and social care sector, particularly social work and community care officers. We've also got within other sectors, within ARA, electricians, technicians, and within education, teachers of particular subjects, within our audit service, within environmental health, and we continue to work with the services to find alternative ways to attract or different alternative approaches to filling the posts, which a lot of that is about our succession planning and bringing more trainees on. The payroll activity is detailed, and you'll note a particular increase in the number of terminations. This is due to work that's been ongoing with the community care bank within health and social care in the main. A lot of the community care officers were in the internal bank, so we've removed the internal bank, which is a positive step, and also a bit of cleansing of the system. The communications overview is on page 42, which highlights activities and campaigns. Whilst I'd note the drop in the figures for this period, this is not unusual due to the summer recess and the school holidays. Organisational development key performances are on page 43, and this has been updated to provide members with more details on the online induction module, leadership programmes and mentoring framework, as well as the FaceTime engagement. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Amanda. Is there any questions or points for Amanda? Councillor Cogley.
Amanda, thank you very much for that. And I've got some questions in relation to absence, because this, I know we've put a huge resource into looking at absence and assessing the reasons for it. And I see that stress, as previously, is still massively high. What are we actually doing very specifically in terms of assisting people with managing stress, and particularly perhaps on their return to work, having been absent on a stress-related matter? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So there is a significant amount of work goes in, so from the start or before the employee goes off sick. We've got early interventions, which we're one of the very few councils that does have that, and that includes an appointment with occupational health for the individual employee. So if they report sick with stress, or are they showing signs prior to going off to try and stop them going off, we have got an occupational health intervention at that point to see what can be done, what mitigation can be put in, what changes can be done. If unfortunately then they do go off, we have a robust support and attendance at work policy, which we follow. And when we went to Cabinet, we had put in the paper that Health and Safety were reviewing the stress risk assessment even, and that has been done and carried out with our colleagues for CMT. So it's now been rolled out, and that's a much more engaging process with individuals where they've got a wellbeing plan to complete, and we're putting responsibility onto the employees as well as the employer or the manager to support that individual about what they can do and what we can do to try and keep them at work or get them back to work. We've got ongoing reviews, we've got contact on a regular basis, and obviously we've got occupational health, and we've got our assist programme, which is 365, 24 hours a day contact. From the Cabinet paper, you'll recall we also we're putting in an additional resource from People and Culture. That post closes on Friday, so hopefully to get somebody into that post in the very near future. Whether the changes to health and safety, they've been very recent, so it's a bit early yet to see what improvements there'll be, but we're plugging away, we're keeping things, but there is numerous resources. When we've reviewed it, we've looked to see if there's anything else that we could add into the mix, but we think we've covered all areas. We're big bit now with this additional resource going in is making sure it's been consistently applied across all services in the council.
Thank you very much for that. And is your gut feel that we will make some impact on reducing those levels of stress-related absence?
Don't know if I want quoted in this one, but gut feeling is we'll have done absolutely everything we can, and I would hope that we would make reductions, but obviously with people's life and everything that everybody's dealing with just now, it's very difficult to say what we can do. We can't stop the people going to the doctors and the doctor prescribing that they're off with stress, but we will do everything that we can to support our employees to maintain them at work.
Thank you very much for that. And just in terms of our overall statistics, if we were to remove periods of long-term absence, so for example, if somebody's having a hospital procedure, which could involve 2 or 3 months off, if we took those periods of absence out, how much impact would that have on our stats? Do we know?
Yes, we do know, but I don't have the exact detail here just now. The table at the bottom of page... Sorry, my scrolling is not working.
37 is short.
Yes, shows you the periods of short-term absence and the periods of long-term absence. So you will see that there is over 500 periods, and long-term, obviously, that's more work days are lost. But I can get you the actual data for that and send it on to you at this meeting.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Maben.
Thank you, Chair. Amanda, I'm looking at page 14, the jobs and training. Where the jobs and training fund agreed at Cabinet 22, and there's a target to get 200 apprenticeship placements over the period. We're at 117. So I take it you're already thinking in front to get nearer to the target and hopefully get all 200. And that's because there is a timeline on there. It's from April 22 to March 25. So you've still got time to try and get to your 200 target.
Through you, Chair, thanks for that question. Yes, we are confident that we are on target. So although that number is 117, that's the number of trainees that's been appointed. There's recruitment ongoing just now. There's plans with working with services to bring in new and different apprenticeships. But with the asks that we have, we will achieve the 200 target.
Thanks, Amanda. Is there any more points or questions for Amanda at this point? Nope. Okay, Amanda, thanks very much.
Councillor Hogg.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Councillor Hogg.
Not a problem, thank you. It's just to say to Amanda, in terms of the absences and stress related problems, it's across the board with all areas at this moment in time. It's just the infrastructure that the council has to support our workers is absolutely, it's really very, very good. And it's just to highlight that our council employees do have access to very good backup to keep them as healthy and safe as we can go forward, possibly can. So it's just to make that point that our council does support our employees very well in these situations.
Thanks, Councillor Hogg. That's a good point that you've raised there. Okay, so we'll move on to health and safety, and that's over to you, David.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, members. If I could just begin by drawing members' attention to the top of page 45 of the report. We noted that non-reportable incidents reported through to health and safety section has increased by 52 in comparison to the same piece last year, while the number of incidents reportable to HSE have increased by 1. The increase in the non-reportable incidents is mainly due to one particular establishment. I'm conscious I'm in open session here, so I'm not going to name that establishment, but it's just that direct engagement with dysregulated young people. So we have a very small number of young people with dysregulated behaviours, and that direct staff engagement at the beginning of period 6 is mainly attributable to that jump in statistics that you can see in these periods. Paragraphs 24 to 26 of the covering report outlines the various positive health and safety and wellbeing indicators that we have. And as I usually cover, Chair, with the Here to Listen suicide prevention strategy, we've now trained 551 people in this life-saving skills, and we're on target to reach the 600 people we want to have trained by the end of the year. Since this was launched back in December 2018, those trained first aiders have now carried out 223 interventions with people in crisis. And if I could go back to the last report, East Ayrshire performs, that's an increase of 12 interventions since that last report. Community defibrillator initiative continues to progress well. £82,000 worth of equipment donated under community benefits to us, which we'll be moving across to community groups and clubs. So far, we've donated 45 defibrillators and cabinets to clubs across East Ayrshire, and we've got a further 2 just due to go out in the next couple of weeks. That continues to go, Chair. We continue to get further donations through, and as we get applications through, we will continue to put those pieces of life-saving equipment again out into our communities. If you'd indulge me, Chair, members will probably be aware that certainly on the Community Defibrillator Initiative,
Both ourselves and colleagues in procurement won a National Go Award for that work last week. And I think there's a good Scottish term called half-shut knife, which is just how I feel this morning after an 18-hour shift in Birmingham yesterday at the LGC Awards, where we also won an award for the Dare to Listen suicide prevention work that we do, and also the community defibrillator work we do. I just want to take the opportunity, again, if you'll indulge me, Chair, to pass on my sincere thanks, not only to colleagues that have supported us, particularly our colleagues in procurement, but also our external partners in Scottish Fire and Rescue, who go out as part of that defibrillator initiative, and to this point have trained over 800 people in CPR and defibrillator. So thanks. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, David, and well done. These initiatives are really important initiatives and worthy of the awards. But more than the awards, it's helping the people that need to be helped. So that's excellent news, and good for the council and good for procurement and health and safety, and for our partners who are donating such equipment and the monies to be able to deliver these initiatives. So it's fantastic. So our thanks to all of those partners and contractors, etc., and to yourselves and the team in procurement as well. So that's absolutely fantastic. Does anybody have any questions or points here for David? No, nobody online? No. Oh, Councillor Cogley.
Thank you. David, has there been any increase in incidents and accidents as a result of people working from home? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, no, I'm not seeing any increase in incidents because of working from home, Councillor Cogley. Our underlying incident trends are actually very, very low. By far and away, over 60% of our incidents are violence and aggression related each year, and that's a fairly static figure. And I think that reflects the fact that our staff are out having to carry out fairly difficult jobs, very forward-facing jobs with both the public and with young people, and in some very challenging settings. And while we work hard to try and reduce them, it's a challenge not just here, it's a challenge right across the council, all councils and beyond. In terms of the figures below that, our highest cause of figures off the top of my head last year was slips, trips and falls. So we had over 1,000 incidents of violence and aggression, and in slips, trips and falls we had 111 incidents. The next level below that was actually absconding incidents, which I think was around 65 or 62 incidents. So that gives you a bit of context around the incidents that we see coming through. Our underlying incident numbers below violence and aggression for a council is complex, with the amount of what I would call higher risk activities that we carry out is very, very low. And I think that's testament to the fantastic work that's done, not only by my own team, but also by the managers and staff, and the safety culture that's driven by this council.
Thanks very much, David. Okay, and if there's no further comments or questions for David. Okay, thank you. Members, Colin kindly picked up where Joe was interrupted through the IT with the complaints and the risks and the business briefings. So if there's no questions or points that you want to raise with Colin at this time, okay, then can we agree the recommendations on page, at the bottom of page 11?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I don't know if Joe's online still.
Yes, Chair, yeah.
Yep, Joe, for the bonds and financial guarantees update report.
Chair, it's just a suggestion, but through you and members, and if it's acceptable to Joe, and apologies, I'm just trying to clarify that. I would propose, if you wish, I could take the bonds and financial guarantees, or mostly relating to the planning service, could take that report later if members are minded. I'm just conscious we've got colleagues here from North Ayrshire and the fraud team, and much as I'm sure they find East Ayrshire performs as of much interest as the rest of us, it's maybe appropriate if members are agreeable, and if Joe's okay with that, you agree to take the item, at least item 5 just now, and we can pick up the bonds and financial guarantees, and hopefully I'll be able to present that to members' satisfaction, if that's all right with everybody, just to avoid unnecessary or undue delay.
I think that's fair, David. Okay, Joe, did you get that?
Fine with that, Chair, thank you.
Okay. Okay then, Karen, it's over to yourself for the corporate fraud team presentation. If you want to just introduce your team to us and then your presentation, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much and good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting us along today. It's my pleasure to be able to talk to you, tell you a bit about the work of our team and the partnership that we have with East Ayrshire Council and North Ayrshire Council to counter fraud. If I can just formally introduce the team to you. Firstly, there's myself who manages the team. I'm Karen Gray, and I've managed the team since February 2015, when the team was initially set up. I am a SIPFA counter fraud specialist. I have the SIPFA certificate in fraud risk management and the SIPFA diploma in counter fraud management. Prior to taking up this role, I worked in North Ayrshire Council as an internal auditor, and I'm also a member of the Institute of Internal Auditors. When the team was set up in 2015, I was joined by two of our current investigators, Ray Hodge and Margaret McCall. And Ray and Margaret were internally appointed. They had formerly been housing benefit fraud investigators. Margaret and Ray are both PINS trained, which stands for Professionalism and Security, and it's the DWP standard for investigations. Ray is also an accredited counter fraud specialist. Our third investigator is David Perrott on the left here. David started his career initially in local government and then moved on to a 25-year stint in Police Scotland, working his way through the ranks, ending his time there as a DI in the fraud squad, and then joined us in 2017, just after we entered into the partnership agreement with East Ayrshire. Last but not least, we've got Graham McMaster, who's on the end here. Graham joined us in 2021, and Graham's work history prior to joining us, he worked in the antisocial behaviour investigation team as an investigator there. So quite a mix of skills, expertise, qualifications within the team. So I have split this technical issues. I've split this presentation down into 3 sections. There we are. Who we are, so telling you a wee bit about how the team was set up, how we fit into the corporate structure and the partnership agreement, a bit about what we do to counter fraud across the 2 authorities, and then how we're doing, so a bit more about the results that you'll see in the upcoming committee report. I think I'm just going to go to the podium. Sorry about that. Okay, so who we are. The team was set up in February 2015. That was a result of the DWP moving to setting up a single fraud investigation service, which saw the transfer of responsibility for housing benefit investigation moving from the local authority over to DWP. As a result of that, some local authorities, through the 2-pay process, lost their investigators because they moved over to DWP. And as a result of that, the skills and expertise walked out the door with them. At North Ayrshire, we decided to hold on to our housing benefit investigators, and we also restructured the internal audit team and set up a new corporate fraud team. So that gave us the mix of being able to investigate external fraud as well as internal fraud. And the setup using an existing internal auditor meant that we could take our investigations that wee bit further, right through to the identification and rectification of internal control weaknesses. East Ayrshire Council, however, the benefit fraud investigators moved across to DWP as part of that to-pay process. So in October 2016, we entered into a partnership agreement to deliver a shared fraud service across North Ayrshire Council and East Ayrshire Council. Because of that, we had to expand the team to manage the additional workload and deliver the service. So we created an additional 2 fraud investigator posts. The team are employed by North Ayrshire Council. We're based at North Ayrshire Council headquarters, but we do have an equal remit across the larger geographical area. Within North Ayrshire Council, we sit alongside our internal audit colleagues. We report to the same senior manager, who is also the chief internal auditor. And at East Ayrshire Council, quite similarly, we report to the chief internal auditor and to the head of finance and ICT. So that's who we are. Moving on to what it is we actually do. We are a specialist investigation unit. We investigate dishonesty offences, so fraud, theft, embezzlement, things like that. Members of the team are specially trained so that we can operate as a specialist reporting agency, which means that we can carry out criminal investigations just in exactly the same way that the police do, under the same criminal justice legislation, and we report direct to the Procurator Fiscal. The only difference between ourselves and the police is that we don't have the powers to arrest and detain. So the main 4 parts of what it is we do is broken down into prevention, detection, investigation and enforcement. So on the prevention side of things, prevention is always better than the cure, you know, and when it comes to fraud, that's definitely the case. And the very existence of a dedicated fraud resource like the corporate fraud team, that in itself is a preventative measure. There's a number of theories around measuring the true cost of fraud to an organisation. But fraud itself is an offence that is enabled by deception. So therefore it's hidden, it's unknown until the point it's detected. So how can you accurately measure what you don't know? So on that basis, we're very much of the opinion that our success is not measured by financial outputs, but we do recognise that there is real value in the preventative measure that the existence of a corporate fraud team is. We also work very closely with our internal audit colleagues. We share knowledge and action plans around the identification and rectification of control weaknesses and to maintain a robust internal control framework. We can carry out presentations to services, promoting the role and remit of the team, have that dialogue around where we might be able to add value to that area of the business and how we can work together going forward to deal with fraud. We also periodically hold publicity and public information stands, and that's to promote awareness out with the organisation. Moving on to detection, most of the work that comes our way is through the referral process. And our referrals, we try and make the referral process as easy as possible. So
we're not precious about how people can contact us, whatever they're comfortable doing, whether that's email, telephone, through the post, we're fine about that. Calls to the team are not recorded, and we are happy to allow reporters to remain anonymous. Most of the referrals we receive come from colleagues, from other services that might identify issues through the course of their work. And these are, generally speaking, these are quite good value referrals. They're based on fact and generally lead to good outcomes. We do also receive referrals from members of the public, a lower level at East Ayrshire, but we find that the referrals that we receive from the members of the public may be less accurate, sometimes malicious, and don't always lead to as good an outcome as the internal referrals. We also detect fraud through data matching. And data matching is where we extract information from council systems and compare that data to identify any potential anomalies that might suggest fraud. We carry out various proactive exercises where we actively go looking for fraud, so not dealing with the stuff that we already know about. We actually go out our way to try and find fraud that we don't yet know about. Currently, the team are reviewing all succession applications. So that's where an individual has applied to the council to succeed a council tenancy. And that relationship with our housing colleagues is working well. We also participate in the National Fraud Initiative. Essentially, the National Fraud Initiative is a massive data matching exercise, very similar to what I've already described, except rather than comparing our own internal data sets, we pass our data over to the Cabinet Office, along with another 1,200 UK public sector bodies. The Cabinet Office then match these data sets together and try to establish any potential anomalies that might suggest fraud. The exercise currently is a 2022-23 exercise, and we're just over halfway through that, and it's progressing well. On the investigation side, we do investigate 100% of our referrals. We're lucky enough that, we've said this from the start, but we're lucky enough to still be in the position where we have the resource to do that. So that is where it's suggested to us that someone has provided false information to obtain something from the council, and that something could be a financial gain, it could be a practical gain, it could be a service, or anything at all where they've provided false information to obtain something that they're not entitled to. The areas that we typically investigate, a lot of our work is around council tax, so that can be single person discounts, long-term empty levies, council tax reduction scheme. People maybe not been entirely honest about their household composition in order to gain some kind of discount in their council tax. We regularly have rates referrals, so that might be empty property relief. Information shared with us might suggest that areas of a property are not being used when that's not actually the case. It can be small business bonus relief, where people are not being entirely honest about the rateable value of their properties across Scotland. Housing as well. We work very closely with our housing colleagues, and we have a good working relationship around the Section 18 process. So that is where our housing colleagues suspect that a property may not be lived in. So housing are very keen to recover these properties because a condition of tenancy requires the tenant to actually live there. Where we add value to the process, we have tools and techniques to be able to trace people, to be able to provide evidence that they are actually living somewhere else. And often where that's the case, where someone is living somewhere other than where they claim to be, there's generally a reason for that, and that can be to do with their benefit entitlement. So not only will we trace the individual, which allows housing to recover the property, it also allows housing to chase that person for any rent arrears that might otherwise have been unrecoverable. But also we will look at where that tenant actually is living, and it allows us to look at that address and to see if there are any benefit issues there. We deal with the Scottish Welfare Fund, which is a discretionary pot of money for people in real financial crisis. Because of the qualifying criteria for this type of money, it has to be easily accessible, and that makes it very easy to abuse as well. Some other things here: discretionary housing payments. That is the subsidy that benefit claimants can have. It's commonly known as the bedroom tax, and it kind of goes hand in hand with housing benefit and council tax reduction. Care fees, that can be if someone is entitled to some sort of care from the council, they may have to undergo a financial assessment, and there can be attempts to disguise capital, income, property, that sort of thing. Blue badges, we look at the misuse of badges, whether that's a cancelled badge, an expired badge, a forged badge, and we also look at misuse by a third party or someone who's not entitled to be using the badge. I've also tagged on licensing and landlords there, and quite often it's not actually fraud. But it comes across our radar, maybe unregistered landlords and things like that when we're looking at tenancy or benefit related issues. So in order to go about our investigation work, we need to have rights of access. We need to be able to access the right information. So internally, our right of access is through the financial regulations, section 14, which gives us access to all council systems, networks, information, records, documents, correspondence and devices. It also provides for us to request and obtain explanations from council officers, elected members for any matter that's under investigation. The other piece of legislation that we use on a regular basis is the Data Protection Act. Now, the Data Protection Act does exist to protect data and stop unlawful sharing of data, but there are a number of exemptions in there, and those exemptions can provide a legal gateway for us to use information for the prevention and detection of crime, the apprehension or prosecution of offenders, and the assessment or collection of any tax, duty or imposition of a similar nature. So this is the legislation that we use on a daily basis. There are other pieces of legislation that allow us access to certain types of information, but maybe not used just as much as this particular one here. Moving on to enforcement. Enforcement action can be anything from refusal of an application. It's obviously better if we can get in at an early stage, identify fraud before anyone has managed to obtain any kind of payment or service from us. So that's the ideal. However, where there has been some sort of payment, discount, relief, service, where there has been no legitimate entitlement, we will always take steps to recover that. Only in very exceptional circumstances would we know it. We may temporarily confiscate a blue badge. We may recover expired, cancelled or forged badges, or we may permanently withdraw or revoke the use of a blue badge. And depending on the circumstances, the values, and whether it's in the public interest, we may progress to a criminal prosecution. So we would do that via an interview under caution and then a prosecution report to the Procurator Fiscal. So how are we actually doing? Well, these values will come up in the committee report just shortly. But in the first 6 months of the current financial year, the financial recoveries for East Ayrshire Council are 12.7 thousand. We've worked with housing to recover 36 housing tenancies. We have issued 9 warning letters for blue badge offences, and we've recovered 1 blue badge. We have referred 25 cases over to the DWP SFIS, and we've had 1 other onward referral to another council service. And aside all of these, there's been a further 8 corrections to data, just to ensure that our customer claimant information is up to date and correct. So I've now got 3 anonymised case studies for you, just to give you a bit of context around how some of our cases might progress and conclude. So the first case study is based on a Section 18 referral that we received from our housing colleagues. So there was a suspicion that they believed the tenancy wasn't actually being lived in by the tenant. We started a bit of investigation, and we did manage to successfully trace that tenant to another address, which allowed our housing colleagues to recover that tenancy. But also the tenant had run up some arrears that then allowed housing to pursue, that they would have been otherwise unrecoverable. We also then looked at the address where the tenant was actually living, and it was established that he was living with a partner who was in receipt of a single person discount. So the single person discount was removed at the new address as well, with a financial result of £856.17. Our second case study is based on a referral that we received from one of our council tax colleagues. There was a suspicion that the property may have been empty. Correspondence had been sent to an address and there had been no reply, numerous attempts, and the council tax officer felt that there was a chance that the property wasn't being lived in. The liable party hadn't updated any records but continued to pay their council tax, and there was a belief that this might have been to avoid the long-term empty levy being applied to the account. Investigators went out and had a wee look around, and they managed to establish that the liable party was living elsewhere. So the long-term levy in the region of £6,000 was applied. But investigators also identified a neighbouring property, unrelated liable party, but they established that that was also empty, so allowing us to apply another long-term empty levy in the region of £2,500. Our third case study is based on a referral from the Ayrshire Roads Alliance. One of the parking attendants sent us a report of a misuse of a blue badge. The misuse was around the vehicle had parked and there were 2 gentlemen in the car. One left the car and the parking attendant believed that the driver who left the car wasn't actually the badge holder, and the badge holder remained within the car. So not a permissible use of the blue badge, because that was allowing the driver to take advantage of the parking concession that he wouldn't have been entitled to. The driver and the passenger were both non-compliant with the parking attendant. They wouldn't provide details, they wouldn't provide the badge for inspection. However, the parking attendant issued a parking charge notice anyway and sent the details to our team. We investigated, we traced the badge holder and we traced the owner of the vehicle. And on this occasion, it was 2 warning letters that went out. The reason being that these individuals did engage with us, and we did accept that it was a legitimate misunderstanding of the terms of the use. But 2 warning letters were issued, one to the third party and one to the badge holder, with a warning that if anything like this was to occur again, we'd be looking at prosecution action. Okay, so the next steps for the team. We're currently just over halfway through the National Fraud Initiative. And the National Fraud Initiative is in two parts. The first part where we extract data from council systems and upload that to the Cabinet Office. The Cabinet Office then release those matches back to us for investigation. An investigation is currently well underway, and we're on target to meet the deadline of the 31st of March. Around summertime of 2024, Audit Scotland will produce their report on the final outcomes of the current NFI exercise, and an update report will come back to this committee shortly afterwards. Next week is International Fraud Awareness Week, and the Corporate Fraud team are regular supporters of this. So if you're not already following us on Facebook or X, please do so. Give us a follow, and next week we'll be increasing our online presence, and we'll have a social media campaign to share awareness of fraud, the fraud team's remit, and how that affects the council. And lastly, we are attempting to resurrect joint working with the DWP. We have worked quite successfully with DWP in the past. It did pretty much grind to a halt during pandemic times. And as we came out the other side of the pandemic, DWP struggled to fill their investigator posts again. Many of their investigators had moved on or been redeployed elsewhere to do other duties, and not all of them came back to their original posts. So DWP have been recruiting quite successfully. They have a whole new load of fraud investigators in post who are now either just completed their training or just about to complete their training. So we're hopeful that we're going to be coming back to the pre-pandemic norm. Thank you very much for listening. I'm now happy to take questions, or if you prefer, you can direct your questions towards the investigators. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. That was a good presentation. Really good. The one statistic that stuck out for me was the tenancy repossessions after abandonments. I mean, it's really, for me, it's really important and necessary that we get all our abandoned tenancies back into circulation for relet, because there's too many people that are currently sitting waiting for houses, you know, for so long, you know, that they practically give up. So to actually know that there's some abandoned tenancies out there, you know, and to know that this works, that you're doing, that your team's doing to reclaim them, that's really good and encouraging. So for me, that's really good value, and I'm quite sure that housing appreciate that too, and it's value to their service as well. So that's really good. So well done for that. Is there any other questions or points for Karen or any of the members of the team? Councillor Maben.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the excellent report and the presentation, and for the wee chat we had earlier. It's good to hear that you're going to be doing more on social media, which I was going to suggest. What our chair has just said about recovering tenancies is brilliant work, and there was an email circulated out about the good work you were doing. So it'd be great to see that on your social media, and most of us as elected members have got our own social media pages, and then we can share that out and show the public the good work that you're doing. So well done.
Thanks, Councillor Maben. Is there any questions or points for Karen? Or any members of our team? MD online? No. Okay. Well, Karen, thank you very much. We appreciate the work that you and your team are doing for us, so thank you. Thank you very much, team. Okay. So, are we going over? David, we'll go straight to Aileen's report. Yeah, so that's the mid-year progress report, Aileen.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, members, and thanks to Karen and the team. It's very much a joint effort with Karen's team and my team, our internal audit team in East Ayrshire as well. It's probably useful to mention that we're actually still the only shared corporate fraud team in Scotland, which surprises me. Some other teams do work collaboratively. We work collaboratively, particularly with South Ayrshire Council, and Cairns in a national network of corporate fraud teams. So we get the benefit of sharing experience more widely than just East and North. But I think that there's a lot of strength in that shared service that we have. And part of the reason we went for shared service in East Ayrshire was when there were all the changes in this world of fraud with DWP back in 2016. Craig MacArthur, who was head of finance at the time in this council, and I sat down and looked at what would be the best practice going forward. And we watched what was happening elsewhere. England were a wee bit ahead of the change of arrangements in Scotland at the time, and what SIPFA were highlighting were the very good results coming back from shared corporate fraud teams in England. So we decided to go down that route. It was there was no similar models in Scotland, and here we are, 7 years later, and there are still no other similar models. But it works for us, and I think it works well at the moment. So in terms of your mid-year report, I was only going to highlight a few paragraphs because Karen's given you a very good overview of where we are at the moment with the work of the corporate fraud team. So I want to highlight paragraph 6 as part of the background to the corporate fraud team. We mentioned there a benchmarking exercise we did a few years ago as part of the business case to continue the relationship with North Ayrshire Council. And as you know, it's been a continuation of short-term contracts with North Ayrshire that get reviewed on a regular basis to make sure that we're still happy with the service and we're still getting best value from that service. So we're proposing, it's not in the report at the moment, but we'll bring back to you in due course another benchmarking exercise, which we'll also take to Cabinet when we go back up to review the relationship with North and where we're going after 31st of March 2025, which is the end of the current contract with North Ayrshire Council. So if I move on, the main report, which is from paragraph 16, and the heading there, I think it's really important to just reinforce what Karen presented, that for us it's not just about financial outcomes. Corporate fraud team is never supposed to be just about covering its costs. So for me, the support to service delivery, that recovery of tenancies, the blue badges, the assurance that we get, and you'll see from Appendix 3 in the report that we get a lot of assurance, particularly from the proactive work that the team do. I mean, they've carried out hundreds of visits to our commercial properties in East Ayrshire and residential properties to check that council tax and non-domestic rates are working properly. And generally, that's given us a lot of assurance that our revenue and benefits team in the council are doing a good job. And in fact, in some areas, they've given us 100% assurance, which is fabulous. Because if we remember at paragraph 20, we need to be careful that the outcomes from corporate fraud work are not too high, because that would probably mean our controls in the council are not very good. But that's not what the work's telling us. Inevitably, you'll get people trying to defraud the council. You will get some that will slip through. And the corporate fraud team are the safety net for us to make sure that we're deterring and detecting. And I think at the moment where we are is probably in quite a good place in terms of the findings don't give me a huge cause for alarm, but they're giving me assurance. And I hope that continues to be the case. That causes us some difficulty when we try and benchmark, because I've seen benchmarking in other councils where they say, we've recovered £1 million this year, we must be really, really good. No, your controls are probably quite bad. So it's sometimes quite difficult for us to find the common ground to do the benchmarking, but we'll aim to provide a useful report within the next year. Karen's mentioned the NFI, which is covered from paragraph 21 to 22, and I'll bring a report back to committee once the current exercise is completed. So the current exercise, as well as the corporate fraud team supporting NFI for us, our services in the council are actually the people who investigate the matches that come back from the Cabinet Office, and that's overseen by Karen with the support of Paul Davis, our audit manager. So that's very much a team exercise. Paragraph 23, it's always useful that you can take assurance from what other people say about us, because of course I'm going to sit here and say we provide a good service, and I truly believe we do provide a good service, but external audit have consistently said that the arrangements in this council for the prevention and detection of fraud and other irregularities are appropriate. Appropriate is probably the most you'll get out of external audit, so that's a good scorecard. So paragraph 23 just reminds us that on 12th of October, just a few weeks ago, external audit came up with their annual report, and I've provided that ongoing assurance, so you can place trust in the fraud arrangements according to external audit. So that's always a good place to be. The only other thing I was going to mention before we stop for questions, Chair, was Karen had mentioned that International Fraud Awareness Week. Eddie and I had a chat about this, and we decided social media was the best way to go this year with that. Usually, year on year, we've gone out and represented, with the corporate fraud team, represented the service at various locations in the community. But what we were finding was the footfall at those locations, particularly since COVID, has decreased significantly, and we weren't quite reaching the number of people that we wanted to reach. So we're focusing the International Fraud Awareness Week promotion around social media. So it'll be in the Chief Exec's blog this Friday to all of the staff. And remember, most of the good referrals come from the staff, they come from services. We're also promoting it, Karen and the team are promoting it through their well-established Facebook and X accounts, we have yesterday a press release was issued by our comms team in the council, and the council's website was updated as well. So we are looking at a number of areas there. I do think people will find a place if they want to report a fraud, and I think that's generally the case, but it does no harm to keep promoting, and I think promoting the outcomes and the very positive outcomes to the community, particularly in terms of promoting service delivery. So happy to take any other suggestions from members around that promotion of the work of the team. So Chair, I'll stop there, and as usual, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ailey. Does anybody have any questions for Ailey? Points? No, just noticing one of the appendices, Ailey, and it's the cumulative outcomes, Appendix 3. We go down to housing, support to tenancy recovery work. In total, there's been 143. So that's huge for me. That's real value, getting these houses back and the circulation for relay. That's really, really good. Yep. And again, the tenancy succession applications with no rejections. There was 13 this year, no rejections, so that's good.
And and as Karen said, 100% of tenancy succession applications are being checked now by the corporate fraud team. So last year a few were refused. This year so far they're all good. They're all in line with the requirements. So whether that's coincidental or whether that is because the message is getting out there that they are being checked very, very thoroughly. But we're in a good place with that at the moment. I suppose, Chair, it's useful to point the members to paragraph 18, where the Head of Housing and Communities has recognised the work of the corporate fraud team in continuing to support his service performance improvements. And that was something that the Head of Housing had first noted last year in terms of his feedback to us, and we reported that to members a year ago. But it's a continued testimonial, effectively, my Head of Housing. He continues to be very happy about the support from the corporate fraud team and the impact that's having in service delivery in the community.
Absolutely, would 100% endorse that. It really, really is. Okay, any questions, comments? No. So can we agree the recommendations on page 116? Agreed, thank you very much. So are we keeping with Ailey, David? Or?
If you don't mind.
If you don't mind, okay.
Thank you.
Internal audit plan, mid-year progress.
So
okay.
Our mid-year report on our internal audit work, and I was going to say at this point the corporate fraud team are free to go, because I know you've got a stack of work to do, including working through all those referrals. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, mid-year report for internal audit team. It's a good report. We're bringing it up to you just to give you an update on where we are, and we are where we should be at this point in terms of the number of days that we've delivered and the work that we're delivering. We're also presenting a revised plan, minor changes in that plan, but we also need to continue to demonstrate our compliance with the various statutory and regulatory obligations. So that's all incorporated in this report as well. So you'll remember paragraph 4 notes that you agreed the original internal audit plan for the council on the 20th of April. And we all know that's a live plan, so I've got the delegated authority to change the plan depending on emerging issues in the council. And there's been a small number of changes that I'll come on to in a moment. If we move down to the main report from paragraphs 7 and 8, the progress towards the annual opinion is going well. The primary role of internal audit, as you know, is to produce that statutory annual opinion that I need to comment on the governance, risk management and control, internal controls within the council. And the audit plan is designed to give me enough evidence to write that annual opinion. So every year we've managed to do enough work to have a robust evidence to underpin that opinion, and we're heading to that position again this year. So at the moment I've got no concerns that we'll end up with sufficient work to inform the opinion at the end of this year. I don't want to say at the moment what the opinion is likely to be, because I always think that jinxes it, but every year we've given you reasonable assurance. So the trust and internal audits laid out in paragraphs 9 and 10, like the fraud arrangements, external audit have also concluded that the internal audit function is operating effectively. Again, that's like a gold star from external audit. That's a good report card, again, operating effectively. I think Deloitte used to call us robust, but operating effectively is good. And we had the EQA report that's mentioned at paragraph 10, which you heard from the EQA independent examiner back in April. If I move on, we've got some updates on our professional world from paragraph 13 onwards. I wanted to highlight at paragraph 15, the chair joined one of our chief auditors meetings, and that's the first time audit chairs have ever been invited to join the chief auditors meeting nationally. I think that was very useful, and we are at the early stages of creating a group for audit chairs to support audit committees going forward, and it's the first time that'll ever been done in Scotland, so I think that's a really good initiative. Paragraph 16, we've got some of the outcomes from our conference back in June. We've set up nationally a number of good practice working groups. We are on all of them, and they're to cover current issues and emerging issues. So internal audit resourcing, climate change, data analytics and risk management. And we're working in those groups alongside service colleagues. So for example, in the risk management group, Ian Tuff, the head of corporate support, sits on that group with me. We're having our second meeting tomorrow, and we've covered a lot of ground so far. Again, it's covering a gap in Scotland. It's to create a best practice sounding board for risk management in local government. So if I move on, table 1, just below paragraph 17, shows that we've achieved 50% of the plan in terms of audit days at this point. So that's where you would want us to be. Paragraph 18 just summarises the outcomes that are presented in appendices 2 and 3, where most jobs are either green, so that means they're either completed or they're work in progress, or they're amber, which means they're scheduled in my team's work plans to get done this year. Of course, there can be unexpected events during the year that, require us to maybe go down a slightly different path. But generally, we are on the path that you've agreed as in terms of the original plan back in April, and we're doing well to deliver. The revisions to the plan are laid out from paragraph 21. They're minor and they're summarised in table 2. I wasn't going to mention, but well, somebody else mentioned earlier recognition they had. So why don't we mention the recognition for internal audit at paragraph 23? Audit Scotland earlier this year produced a national report on growth deals. And very unexpectedly, because it was about growth deals, one of the 3 good practice points they identified nationally was the work of internal audit in this council on the Ayrshire growth deal, which we lead the internal audit function on. So it's always nice to have that recognition, particularly where it's newer areas of our activity. Paragraph 25, just wanted to mention Appendix 3, which is all our follow-ups. And as you know, every single recommendation we make, we follow up to support the service in terms of implementation. And we continue to do that. And again, that's looking good. We're fairly early on in that journey this year, but the outcomes so far are good and positive, and services continue to implement the recommendations and I think generally engage with internal audit, which is the culture you would want in any council, and that's a very positive culture that remains in this council. So I think in that positive note, Chair, that's where I'd like to stop, and we can allow time for any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ailey. Any questions or points for Ailey? No, anybody online? No. Well, we're just looking forward to hearing more about the National Forum for the chairs, Ailey. So just it'd be good to get some news in that soon if we could. And just looking at your plan, I mean, there's lots going on. As you said, there's lots of jobs either been completed or in progress. There's some just oven ready to go, and then there's some that's been deferred, and the ones that's been deferred have explained perfectly well in the report. So thanks very much for that. So if there's no questions or comments for Ailey, will we agree the recommendations in page 127? Yep. Okay, thank you. Ailey, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's absolutely fine. No, thank you. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so we'll go into the submission of the Climate Change Public Sector Report for 22-23. That's over to Andrew. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Members, the report sets out the Council's response to climate change, presents the submission to the Scottish Government and updates members on the climate strategy actions. The report was presented and agreed by Cabinet yesterday with a proposed submission to the Scottish Government by the end of November deadline. I would also note, obviously, last year's discussions at GNS, the ask was that we bring this report to the committee here today before we make the submission. So obviously we've had to kind of rearrange the arrangements to allow that to happen. The report recognises the challenge climate change is having on our communities, the complexity of delivering the innovation and technical solutions, and the delivery of national policy and legislation change, as well as obviously our kind of aims to try and meet our local commitments for the ambition to address climate change and achieve net zero. Government legislation is clear on the aim to reduce our carbon footprint and transition to net zero, although the Committee for Climate Change has challenged the pace and scale at a national level. The wider context of our journey to net zero is challenging, and this is reflected in the report. However, the actions and activity within East Ayrshire is delivering a positive contribution to both our current carbon footprint and setting us up well for our future steps that we need to take. I would like to thank initially James Lally, who's here for any of the hard questions, and the other colleagues who have been involved in this. Also just note that Natasha and Connor are here as well. Connor's just started with us last week, and Natasha, who's been working as a graduate intern with us, is obviously now in one of the temporary posts to take this agenda forward. And I think just recognising that the work that's been done, not just in terms of coordinating and pulling this report together, but actually the activity and the actions to ensure that actually what we're reporting today is a really positive progress around our climate change objectives. The appendix to the report is the standard format set out by the government to be submitted and is consistent with previous years. We have been submitting a climate change report for over 10 years. and the report demonstrates a significant progress in reducing our carbon footprint within those 10 years, with a 50% reduction in that period. And clearly what we're also demonstrating is an additional 30% reduction in the past 12 months. The main report tries to reflect its standard submission, but also bring to life the work being delivered across the whole organisation. The report aligns with the 4 key themes of the climate change strategy and reflects on the actions we have progressed, the impact that this has had, and the areas we continue to develop our knowledge and prepare for future challenges. The 4 key themes that we set within our strategy were energy, transport, waste and natural environment. The first 3 of those areas directly impact on our carbon footprint measures, and those are reflected in the report. I don't intend to go through the detail, obviously, of the report, but I just obviously want to highlight a few areas within the sections covered. So clearly, sort of within energy, a lot of the focus is on what the future requirements are going to be rather than being able to deliver those short-term changes. So the core project, the Ayrshire Master Plan and the local heat and energy efficiency strategy are all areas of work that we're developing just now, and we expect to see some further progress over the next year or so. Clearly, we've already talked about the capital programme, and there's significant implications there for our net zero targets, and a number of areas that we've been working on. The projects Simon mentioned earlier around Dunlop, St Sophia's and Doon campus are all very much at the cutting edge of those net zero designs, and we continue to look at opportunities to develop that and get external funding as well to support it. The other area noted in the report, I suppose, is just maybe thinking a wee bit more around some of those short-term measures, looking at the behaviour change, and also not just the carbon footprint, but the cost around our energy use is reflected in that, to really sort of try and sort of change people's behaviour. We're also doing a lot of work around the schools that will roll out into other buildings, and was mentioned yesterday, but I won't go into the same detail, about our mascot Windy, who is obviously going to be working with the schools to kind of progress some of these sort of behaviour changes. Within transport, then clearly the use of HVO, hydro-treated vegetable oil, has had a significant impact. That's a real challenge because it's a short-term fix to a longer-term problem, and it does come with some additional costs. I mean, clearly our move towards electric fleet and addressing maybe some of those wider challenges that we have in terms of the larger fleet and the potential transition to things like hydrogen or much more efficient electric vehicles that would be able to cope with the demands of those things are clearly still at a national level being discussed. And again, issues at a national level where there's delays being proposed around some of the targets to transition to electric fleet, again, is obviously impacting in what we're capable of delivering. A lot of our electric fleet up until now has been funded through external grants and government funding. Over the last year or so, that's really kind of dried up, and there's less opportunities for that, which again is probably putting a bit of delay on some of our ambitions. But clearly the other part of not just what we use in terms of our fleet, but what we don't use. And I think transition to active travel and strengthening some of the work around kind of getting people out of their vehicles, walking, cycling, etc., again, is obviously key to delivering a reduction in our carbon use. And again, maybe just highlighting particular mission to the moon scheme that we've developed, and a lot of the work that's happening between the schools and the active travel teams and Ayrshire Roads Alliance is really starting to kind of show some real benefits and positive outcomes. Waste, again, massive shift in our carbon footprint around waste, mainly around the change to the interim contract that we've now got, which is taking waste away from landfill and moved it to energy from waste. That is obviously ahead of the legislative requirements that will be put in 2025 to do that. So, but clearly, we would also look for the new contract that we anticipate will be awarded early part of next year to continue that progress and continue to kind of maintain that reduction. But again, clearly the alternative areas there are around reducing our waste, recycling our waste is still better than looking at energy to waste as a ultimate solution. And again, some of those national issues around legislative change, things like the deposit return scheme, again, is obviously having implications in how quickly some of this transition will be delivered. The fourth area clearly doesn't directly impact on the figures within the report, but is absolutely a key priority for the council, which is our natural environment, recognising that East Ayrshire has some real strengths there in terms of the wider environment and the opportunities for using that both for green energy and also to strengthen biodiversity. Again, in the report, a lot of reference in this activity around peat restoration, tree planting, hedge planting, etc., and also the local development plan clearly has a whole range of aspects that are covering both adaptation and mitigation, as well as obviously some of those sort of opportunities for biodiversity. In addition to our own activity as an organisation, we continue to act on our community leadership role, engaging in and supporting the wider community. As I've already mentioned, a huge amount of work's happened around our schools. Clearly, a lot of the work in developing the strategy was in partnership with our young people. The introduction of the Clean Green Awards, the continued development of the conference, and the action plans now that we've got across a significant number of our schools. The award scheme in particular, I think, just to recognise that the Eco Schools scheme, which is run by Keep Scotland Beautiful, have recognised our approach, and they've adopted that effectively. So as our schools achieve our action plan, they will also get a green flag because of the work that we've set up and the robustness of the scheme that we've introduced. And obviously that resulted in 25 additional schools getting their green flag this year. In terms of our communities, we've obviously supported the work around the EcoFlex and CARES grant schemes, which have allowed both community organisations and private residents to access national funding that's available. And again, we're looking to kind of continue to support that. Clearly, a lot of the activity over the last year has also been linked to cost of living, particularly around energy, that obviously both that kind of reducing your energy is saving money and obviously reducing our carbon footprint. And again, a lot of the support, we've done the cookbook and we've done a whole range of social media aspects that we'll look to develop as we move forward. And again, some references in there where we've looked to take up opportunities at a national level within our area, so that Climate Action Towns, again, Drongan was chosen at a national level to develop, and there's a lot of work happening there within our communities. We also obviously are supporting a lot of work around our business engagement as well, and the Accelerator programme that we've introduced and supported through the Climate Change Fund, and also a whole range of net zero grants that have been available and issued to community groups. And again, referring back to the core project, clearly there's a whole range of partnership engagement work and working both with local businesses and the university sector as well, to kind of develop our pathways to move forward in those areas as well. So I suppose just in terms of just additional points, really recognising that there has been really good progress. We've got some really strong stories in there to kind of move us forward, but there does continue to be huge challenges in meeting this agenda in the long term. What we're looking to do in our next steps are reflected in the report is obviously strengthen that focus and engagement with elected members, and reviewing the member officer working group, and also introducing carbon literacy training as well. We'll continue to engage with our communities, and obviously through the strategic plan engagement that's coming up over the coming months, that'll obviously cover aspects of our climate change ambition. We'll continue to progress the action areas. We'll clearly strengthen the team to help coordinate some of that work. And again, we'll just continue to review next steps to reflect the challenges of national policy, cost pressures, and behaviour change as we move forward to achieve further progress. Happy to leave it there and take any questions, Chair.
Andrew, thanks very much. It's good to know that we're making real progress towards our ambition for 2030, although whether we get there or not is another matter, but we're making good progress and that's what counts just now. I think for me, climate change is a complicated topic, but I fully endorse and support, the whole climate action plan, and I do my bit. It's good to see that the waste, there's a 60% reduction in last year's waste emissions, which is excellent. But when I go across to the recycling and food waste, we've improved by 0.2%. The food waste for me and for the council has always been a bit of a issue. But when you give those figures in tonnage of emissions, etc., how can we, as elected members, turn that information into percentage of households that are actually disposing of their food waste in the manner that we want them to? That for me is missing. So I don't actually know, because then when I see there's 30% of food being disposed in the big bin, the green bin, I mean, what does that mean? In terms of where are we as a local authority and the people of East Ayrshire in their minds about disposing food waste and how that can actually help us reach our targets and improve the climate?
I think food waste, clearly over the last couple of years, I think everybody recognises that it's one of those areas where it really will have a massive impact on our carbon footprint. And I suppose that the challenge, and we've looked with College Through Waste, and we've enhanced the information systems that they've now got. And also they've also got some additional resources as well to kind of focus in on this area. I think one of the challenges about, and probably the key bit is, you've probably mentioned two things there. One of them is measuring it, and then secondly is actually where's the impact. And I think one of the key things that we're looking to do is change that focus, not so much about tonnage, because ultimately you've kind of got a balance of two things. One of them is about your overall reduction and your preferences to reduce. And then what we're measuring then is what is the percentage of the total that's left that's food waste against the other kind of waste. So if we can get the message right to reduce, and I think the cost of living and people's behaviour at home has certainly reflected some of that. So if we're looking for an increase in food waste, when actually we're looking for a reduction, because we don't want people to put it in the bin in the first place, no matter which bin they put it in. So I think that's probably the key change to the message. And then the second part is being able now to be able to measure and demonstrate the number of households that are actually presenting their food waste bin. And I think that's probably the two key areas that we're kind of shifting the kind of concentration. The other part is obviously in relation to the work we're doing with the schools. Last year, the campaigns were around active travel. So we had the mission to the moon, and we've embedded that approach. The two other areas obviously are the power down approach with energy, and also looking to strengthen that activity around food waste. And again, communicating that into the communities and the young people to take that home. So I think the work that we can do at the end of the process through waste and monitoring the number of bins and where that's kind of coming from, but actually again further strengthening that sort of behaviour change approach that we're trying to do as well. So I think the challenge is finding the right way of measuring both those aspects rather than just getting caught up in that one figure, which, as you say, probably isn't going to give us the real delivery of change that we need.
Thanks, Andrew. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a question, page 157, paragraph 38 about the electric vehicle charging points. This basically came out of a constituent inquiry. It was probably a couple of months ago now. And also the constituent was just looking for East Ayrshire to put in their off-road charging points. But there was some really good detailed information came back from officers about that, and I know that there's a project underway where we're looking to basically, and I think on a pan-Ayrshire basis, we're looking to tie in with probably a private partner where we'll possibly as a council transfer the electric vehicle charging points that we've put in, the maintenance and the upkeep of those to a private partner. That will then mean that they'll possibly start charging for the electricity, but therefore it will be a saving to the council. We'll not be paying for the electricity any longer. So that's a wee win. But the big win for the people of Ayrshire will be that I think the number was that on a pan-Ayrshire basis, the number of electric vehicle charging points will go up to something like, was it 850 from memory? But I'm just wondering, I've not heard anything else since that very detailed response came back to me and the information was provided to the constituent and they were happy with what went out to them. But I've not heard anything else about how the council is progressing with that. So it was just to see if we've got an update on where we're at with the EV charging points.
Thanks. I think Richard will come in and answer that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Yes, we are currently in the process of finalising a paper that will come to the Council's corporate management team within the next couple of weeks, and thereafter it'll be a paper to Cabinet. So I would think certainly within the next month or so, that'll be before members for consideration.
No, brilliant. Thanks for that. It was really, again, the feedback that came back from officers was that the amount of interest from potential private partners had been really, really good in that. You can see why there's probably a profit margin to be made. But again, as people look to move from petrol and diesel engines to electric, you know, we're going to need more and more of these charging points. And as a council, we probably just don't have the resource to put them in ourselves. So partnering up with the private sector makes complete and utter sense to me, because we need to provide that service. If folk are going to be driving electric cars, they need places to charge them. So it'll be good to see what's in the paper when it comes back. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Richardson. Councillor Cogley.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Andrew, I've got a few questions to ask. So shall I just run through my questions first of all? Is that probably the easiest way to do it? First of all, just as a general point, I think the work that we've been doing with our young people is absolutely exemplary and first class, and well done to all of you and the teams for setting that up. It's absolutely brilliant. And just on to the questions I wish to raise. When we move from gas or oil fuel to electricity, if the electricity is produced by fossil fuel power, so for example, in heating this building, if we proudly declared that we were heating it with electricity, if that electricity has been produced by fossil fuel, do we know that? And how do we reconcile that with our CO2 emissions? Paragraph 14, that's a tremendous reduction in our CO2 emissions. Do we anticipate that same level of improvement again? Paragraphs 18 and 56 are both linked. This is the move of our waste not going into landfill, but going to RDF. Are we disguising something else that's going on here and just complimenting ourselves for not creating the landfill when really that's that is in disguise of some other cost? Paragraph 38, to go on to the EV charging. So this is again with Councillor Richardson's point. We know we're going to need many more EV chargers. What's the source of electricity that we use for our current EV chargers that are out and about in East Ayrshire and elsewhere? Because again, if we're patting ourselves on the back for not using diesel or petrol, if it's electricity generated through coal or gas or whatever, is that actually a win? Paragraph 82. Just bear with me one moment. I'm currently working with a community that's attempting to build a phyto solar park, and there are a huge number of challenges facing us in terms of getting this solar park up and running. One of the main challenges is actually getting a connection to the grid, and the cost of getting that connection to the grid is absolutely prohibitive, and the planned upgrade of the grid to be able to accommodate this particular system isn't programmed for many, many years. So it's a major barrier in terms of communities actually trying to do something for themselves. And it's a fantastic project, but we really are hitting huge barriers with this one. And I think that's probably it. Thank you. No, sorry, just one more point. We're doing very, very well with the children, but I do think the elected members on the Climate Change Committee would actually like to have a greater input and to be more involved in driving policy forward. So I just wanted to flag that one. Thank you.
Yeah. Fully agree with your final point there, Sally. Okay, Andrew.
Okay. I think, first of all, and obviously just again, as others have mentioned this morning, I'll maybe just take the opportunity to note that the work that we have been doing with young people and the campaigns and the awards, etc., was also recognised nationally through the IESE Awards earlier this year, where they achieved the Bronze Award. So I think absolutely right that the work of the young people is really unique in driving forward the approach in East Ayrshire. In terms of the other questions, I've noted them down, so I'll go through them. So gas to electricity, there's probably two things there. One of them's capacity, which you covered in the other question, Councillor Cogley, and then the kind of how green is our electricity, I suppose, is the best way to put it. So the way that the figures are calculated in the report, there is a weighting based on the kilowatt hours that we use for gas and what we use for electricity. That weighting in the last 10 years has come down by about 75% for electricity, on the basis that at a Scottish Government level, a national level, we have been decarbonising our electricity production. In the last 2 years, on average, we have more or less met our electricity demand through renewables across Scotland. The timing of that is the challenge. So obviously, wind, the investment in wind delivers more electricity in the winter than it does in the summer, etc. Basically, and on windy days, we're doing more. So that continued progress at a national level and investment that's been put in terms of renewables is what the government anticipate will deliver a net zero electricity supply. And that's obviously key to their transition. Clearly with fossil fuels, gas, coal, etc., then there isn't a way of transitioning that to net zero, which is the reason why the aim is to decarbonise and change from those methods of heating and power. In terms of the second question, just around waste, and particularly around waste, but in terms of where we see the same improvement next year, we will see an improvement next year, particularly around the waste contract, because we introduced it kind of halfway through the year. So effectively, this sees a kind of drop of about 10,000 tonnes of carbon, and we'll probably see another 5,000 tonnes reduced next year because of the action that we've already taken that will impact for a full year this year. I think what's left then becomes really challenging, though, and again, a lot of that will be down to our buildings and how those are transitioned, as we mentioned. I think the question in terms of is RDF disguising something else, I think all we can do at this stage, I suppose, is reflect the method that the government have set out for us to measure our carbon footprint. And clearly the transition from landfill to any other form of waste management is a significant improvement. But I would agree there are other aspects here that don't necessarily get covered within our figures, but are then obviously covered elsewhere within the kind of national figures or other organisations. And as an example of that, in terms of our buildings, we have reduced our carbon footprint as an authority because we've community transferred buildings to other organisations. So that then gets picked up on their list rather than ours, but the building's still there. So, you know, I mean, there is definitely a bit where you can get drawn too much into these figures And you do need to take that step back and say, is all of the actions we're taking really making an impact across all aspects of our communities? The EV charging strategy, again, the transition would be that the electricity source, we buy our electricity for our charging in the same place we buy our electricity for everything else. So it would still be across that national agenda to decarbonise that. And again, that probably links to the grid connection issue. Scottish Power Energy Networks have got about £3 billion to actually support the transition to net zero. However, that is clearly across the whole country and delivering a whole range of schemes. There was estimates that if we transfer all of the needs around electricity, electric vehicles, the needs of heating, transition from gas to electricity, we would probably need to increase the energy network by about 60%, which is probably unrealistic in the times that we're talking about. But we are continuing to work with partner organisations to really see what we can do across East Ayrshire. And again, the core project is very much focused on those types of agendas and how we can actually harness and generate electricity and power at a local level for the benefit of the communities locally as well. So again, I think the core project in particular will start to drive forward some of those agendas and hopefully link in with some of the community groups that you've mentioned. And I suppose finally, just in terms of elected members, again, recognising that the work that we'll be doing with young people linked to the member officer working group has been really positive. But I think everybody recognises maybe the time spent in those meetings was not as effective as it could be. So I think the work that we're doing with young people through the conference, through the awards and the school action plans, and also direct with the Young People's Cabinet. I think what we'd look to do is just separate that out a wee bit, and then that'll allow us to focus a bit more in terms of member needs through that group and develop a bit more awareness. The training that I mentioned, the carbon literacy training, we'll offer that to all members over the coming months, as well as obviously senior officers within the council as well, and hopefully that'll help kind of develop some of the discussion that members have obviously raised with us. Hopefully that covers everything.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. That's covered everything, and I look forward to the carbon training. Just one additional point that I'd just like to mention. I had the privilege of attending St Sophia's Parent Council meeting along with Councillor Clark on Monday, I think it was. And the head teacher was talking about a new system that they've introduced for ordering school lunches. And although parents do order them, the children are allowed to override their parents' orders and choose their own lunches. The impact is that there's much less waste. So I thought you'd be pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. Is there any other points or questions for Andrew or James? Councillor Maybin.
Right, thank you, Chair. I've some confusion about numbers. Oh, I don't believe this. Is it switched off? There was tables on 162 and then the index at 184, 185. Oh dear. For example, batteries, there was recycling batteries and there's like 3 different numbers. There's like 1 tonne and 1.3 tonnes, and then you go down to the next table and it's 14 tonnes. And I was just getting a bit mixed up. If somebody can clarify that. Yeah. Page 184, the third one up for the bottom. It says 14 tonnes, and then page 185, we're right in the middle. Batteries to landfill, scope 3 is 1 tonne. And it's mentioned earlier in the papers back in 162, it's 1.3 tonnes. So I'm just wondering whether the numbers are slightly different. I got confused with that. Scrap metal recycle is page 184. It's the second one up for the bottom of 11 tonnes scrap metal recycle. And then on 185, second one up for the bottom, waste scrap metal 528. So I'm getting a bit mixed up with the numbers. I don't know if someone's typos or if they're different categories of scrap metal or if they're different categories of batteries.
I'll maybe let James come in on this one.
Thanks, Andrew and Chair. Yeah, if I could just clarify the issue in relation to batteries, the heaviest tonnage is actually car batteries, and the lighter tonnage is just the batteries that we use in everyday items. And you're correct, and again, in terms of the scrap metal, it's just different categories. There's been quite a significant change to the reporting of waste, and the number of categories reported has been extended significantly this year. I think that's reflected in the report, and it reflects the SEPA reporting arrangements, so we can maybe be a wee bit clearer in future years just about the categories and maybe put in more explanation, but this is just taken from the spreadsheet itself, and the categories that are in the spreadsheet.
Okay. Comparisons. I brought this up last year. Try to work out comparisons if we're doing better than the year before or worse, or possibly for us to scrutinise, how do we compare with other local authorities? We're in a group of 9 comparator local authorities. So are we doing well compared to other local authorities, or can we improve? Can we do much better? I can't, those numbers aren't there. Can we have them in next year?
Again, I'm going to let James come in on this one as well.
Thanks, Chair. We actually did quite a bit of work into this, just on the back of your question last year, Councillor Mabin, and we've raised it with Sustainable Scotland Networks. In delving down and into the comparative figures across council, I think what it actually establishes is that different councils report differently. For example, and this is probably the biggest example that pushes our overall carbon footprint up, we report under waste disposal for not only the council's waste but the community's waste as well. A number of other councils don't. And when you think of the tonnage of waste that is are generated by our communities, that skews our figures massively. Another, just kind of, that there are a number of examples like that. Another example is around Scope 3 emissions. A number of councils actually report the emissions arising from their procurement activity, so the goods and services that we buy, and that pushes their emissions much higher as well. So I think the message nationally from Sustainable Scotland Networks is, at this stage, it's unhelpful to benchmark, because you're comparing apples with oranges in many cases, and in all cases, in fact. So I did consider whether we could do something like that, and I was going to include a section within the report, but given the complexities of it, I think I would end up spending pages and pages of text explaining the differences, and I don't see the benefits. I think what we do in terms of benchmarking and best practice through Sustainable Scotland Networks, and you'll see within the report there are a range of good practice initiatives that we submit, and we look at other councils and we see where we can learn and how we can improve by replicating some of their initiatives and some of the things that are being trailblazed by other councils across Scotland. So that's where the learning and benchmarking is. It's in terms of climate change, rather than, I think we could get completely lost in data analysis when it comes to this, and we could have squads of people trailing through figures, and it wouldn't actually deliver the benefits that we're talking about. We need to look at the big areas where we can win, which we've done in our own case around waste, and where we can really make improvements in our own carbon footprint and learn from others.
Thank you, James, for that answer. On emissions, page 183, corporate emissions. You've halved the corporate emissions in the last 10 years, although I'm understanding from what Andrew was saying earlier, it's some of that is simply due to CAT transfers. So some of the council buildings that we own now, we don't own, the community owns them, and the same carbon footprint will have to be reported in a different way, was the way you explained it. Right. This is still a good news story that the council has reduced their carbon footprint by half. And I hope you're using the social media and try to get that story out there, and then we can all share it again. The other thing I was impressed with was your reporting on the biodiversity, the planting trees, shrubbery. I thought was much more detail in the report this week. It's on this year. It's in 166, paragraph 73. Loads of good information there, which I'm delighted to see that wasn't in the same detail last year. So thank you for getting all that into the report. It's brilliant. And again, the work we're doing with our partners, East Ayrshire Woodlands, the community coalfields, I hope we're also getting that out on social media and the way we're working with schools and stuff. And we're increasing biodiversity, we're increasing the amount of woodland, we're restoring peatlands. This is all brilliant stuff. And I hope the council gets it out on social media. And again, the elected members can share that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Mayburn. So we'll get Councillors Hogg, then Canning, then Stewart to come in. Okay.
It's just a query on table 5 and page 115 about the energy use of buildings incorporating gas and electricity. And I note that 2 of them, the Barony campus and the William McIlvanney campus, are relatively new buildings with very high energy costs. Going forward, will these buildings be able to be transferred over to a more green use or a more green efficient energy usage, because it's exceptionally high amounts of money given the cost of living at the moment anyway, we recognise that. But just going forward, with these amounts of money, will they be able to move over to, for example, I don't know, heat source or different forms of generating the electricity and gas?
So I think that's probably one of the reasons why I wanted to put this table in, actually, just to kind of demonstrate the challenges that we've got. I think kind of probably the first 3 are quite interesting in terms of the diversity and the different types of heating and energy use that they've got in them. But ultimately, these are huge buildings. They're really large facilities and all 3 of them are campuses. Which obviously includes a whole range of other services in there, not just the secondary school, but the primaries, early years, and also they're open for community use at night as well. And even from my own service, we've got significant catering production within each of these locations. So there's a whole range of different aspects in there, whether it's the lighting for the football pitches, or whether it's the cookers for the kitchen, or whether it's the heating. The Barony campus, we've obviously implemented a significant amount of areas there that have reduced our carbon footprint. There's extensive solar panels, and we've also got the biomass heating. So part of the reasons where there's differences there is because of that. So the biomass is probably about half the price of gas heating, and it also takes away most of that carbon footprint measure. Clearly, it's not the ideal solution, but again, it's a step towards it. William McIlvanney campus actually has got a combined gas and heat and power plant effectively, which means it's actually gas that's generating some of the electricity as well, which again is very efficient, but is still ultimately a gas source. The Grange campus and William McIlvanney campuses are part of the PPP and the hub contract arrangements as well. So the responsibility is also with someone else around these properties, but we are working with them to look at that kind of transition. Realistically, we're not going to be able to put in the kind of measures that would get these ones to net zero in the kind of timescales that we're talking about. So the other area we are looking at is whether there's other energy generation. So if we can look at kind of local energy generation as well, then that again helps transition some of the work that we're doing. But clearly there will be some there. So the likes of Doon campus is on there, clearly one that we've already targeted. Sturton as well, we've obviously implemented a biomass heating system there as well, which will start to show improvements for next year as well. So there is bits that we've been doing, but clearly the challenge of all of this is going to be really difficult. And again, the more behaviour change we can take as well potentially helps reduce some of that energy use and therefore the cost.
Okay, Councillor Hogg. Thank you. Councillor Canning.
Thanks, Chair. Just wonder, not expecting a comprehensive answer today, but I just wonder if we can get a kind of an update on the ENERFIT informed review. Totally understand the need for it, but obviously there's a balance between keeping existing stock up to speed in terms of refurbishment and waiting for the ENERFIT, and obviously, you know, Camors and Nether Robert are both waiting for refurbishments which have been sort of deferred a bit. So it'd be useful to have some detail on that in terms of when the timelines, and also what's planned after that in terms of prioritising once the review is complete. So it'd be good to have that information. Not expecting a full answer today, but any members would like it for our ward specifically, and it might be something for a briefing paper for for all members. But thanks for that.
I suppose there's maybe two points on that. I mean, we have completed the work around our buildings that the initial pilot, and we've fed that information nationally. There are, I think it was 6 local authorities, so there's about 25 buildings. We're trying to work with the Scottish Government and Scottish Futures Trust to try and kind of develop that into effectively a toolkit that can then be applied to all of the other buildings. So that work's still kind of progressing in the background, but what we're also doing is now starting to develop that into the particular projects that would form our next phase of capital investment. But clearly, as already been mentioned, our current review of the capital programme, then the two things would feed into each other in terms of setting the priorities and the extent of what we would be able to do within that wider context as well. So I would anticipate, as has already been mentioned, over the next few months we'll start to sort of see some of that information being able to be shared at a more granular level.
Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Canning. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, Councillor Stewart and Councillor Richardson.
Hiya, it's just to congratulate the schools, Andrew, and all the innovative work that they're doing with the children, and particularly I really like the In It partner. No Motors Monday. It'd be great if we could get them all today, no motors any day, but challenges in rural areas for that are a bit wider. See the mission to the moon, is there a prize for the schools? Is it a competition that's gone? Or does it go towards their green flag for the climate challenge? Or is it something that we can maybe get the schools to be part in? Because I was away with the nursery school the other day there, and it was their Halloween walk, and that was just to get some of their miles in, and the Wednesday had a great day, and they probably walked about 3 miles and didn't know they were doing it. So even just, as Whitney Houston says, children are our future. So we really need to be taking the education to them. We need to really be listening to what they're saying, because obviously they'll be sitting here in years to come and we'll be away. We'll be hopefully in a compost bin somewhere. But it's just making sure that this is getting set in place for our children and young folk, and you're doing a great job doing it just now, but how can we take that forward? Can we put challenges into the schools? Does it help, or does it just go by the wayside?
I appreciate everything you said there, and I agree that I think what we've seen over the last couple of years with the engagement through the work that the team that have been involved, and obviously Natasha's been heavily involved in that side of things, as well as Don and Vicky from an educational point of view. And I'm going to say it but you'd be amazed at what a sticker and just the achievement does for young people. I mean, the work that the schools have done, both in terms of buying into the mission to the moon, and also the action plans and the award scheme has been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the number of schools that we had in the first year compared to what we had last year. Schools that signed up for Mission at the Moon last year compared to who have signed up for Journey to Jupiter, which it is this year, has just continued to grow and grow. And the ideas, the sort of different options that the schools and the young people are coming up with has just been absolutely fantastic. And I think the key for me with this has been using some of the teaching staff to embed the approach. I mean, I think Donna and Vicky in particular have been absolutely intrinsic in getting that out, that message into the schools and selling it in a way that they know the schools are going to buy into, and the young people are going to buy into. I mean, the Mission to the Moon, and I think if I go back a wee bit of this story, we had initially proposed in the action plan that we would spend £100,000 on an external scheme that was going to run for 6 weeks. And effectively, by bringing that in-house and using the team that we've got it running all through the year, through every school, and we're building it into the approach that we're taking around energy use, and we're going to take around waste as well. And I think the words that are used here is about gamification, and that's the bit about it. It's something that the kids really want to engage in, and I think this is the real kind of evidence of how well that works.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. It was just the point that my colleague Councillor Hogg brought up about the new skills. I've been in the new Kilmarnock Academy, been in St Joseph's just at the weekend there at the Tents and Residence. Even it's not in the list, but been in the new Kilmarnock College. And one thing you notice is, I mean, we're sitting in an old school here, probably built turn of the year now, apart from this room, which is wide open. If you go to the two doors there, you're into an enclosed corridor. Quite a small corridor. It's just the way the building's designed. And then all the offices are running off the corridors. They're quite enclosed as well. If you get into any of these new buildings, one of the first things that hits you, as soon as you get in the front door, space. Wide open space, huge spaces with breakout areas for the kids and places where they can eat their lunches and all of that. And that's great. That's a move forward. But it's just for a layman thinking about this, they huge wide open spaces take a bit of heating. So I'm just wondering if the design of modern buildings, because it's just common sense. If you've got huge wide open spaces with huge high ceilings, they're going to take a bit of heating. So I just wonder if it's maybe, everything. There's pluses and minuses to everything. And I'm not saying that these new schools aren't a move forward. They definitely are. But maybe with those type of designs comes a certain level of heating cost.
There's a couple of aspects in this, and I don't think there's necessarily a one-size-fits-all or a specific right answer to this. I mean, certainly the work that we're doing around the design around Doon campus and the work we're doing with St Sophia's, where ultimately the key to it is about insulating the building and the airflow. Those are the things that actually really kind of make the biggest difference in terms of heating space. The other bits are about efficiency of heating. And if you've been in this building for the last couple of days, you'll know the challenges of keeping the heating at a regulated temperature is pretty difficult. So the opportunities to control and zone and manage the different things within new facilities is a bit kind of easier to allow that to be kind of reduced. I think that the other aspect, I suppose, is if you look at what we're comparing against, and again, if you look at the Barony campus in comparison to the previous buildings, we'll probably reduce the footprint by about 40%. And obviously the type of insulation, the type of heating and everything we've got in there has also made a significant improvement. So there's things you can do with your old buildings and there's things you can do with your new buildings that are slightly different. But I think the aim is you can still always sort of aim to improve both of them from where they are at the moment.
Councillor Mabin.
Thank you, Chair. And you have the same at Willie McIlvanney campus. It was a merger of two older schools. So those two older academies would have had a much higher heating bill and carbon footprint than the new modern merged campus. I'm guessing that's possibly why Grange Academy is at the top, because it's an older school with more challenging to try and keep the heat in and the insulation and other things. There's only so much you can do with it. Just on the mission to moon and the Jupiter thing, there's another new one. It's the WOW tracker. There's a charity which has got funding for 13 schools, I believe. And Wateriggs Primary and Shortleys Primary are two of hopefully all 13 places will be filled. And it's getting badges for kids, and it's encouraging them to walk, cycle, wheel, or even a drop-off area so that they're walking back with the journey, and try to keep cars away from school gates would be a bonus for most of us as elected members, and encouraging kids to walk and reduce carbon footprint. So that's coming soon as well.
Thanks, Councillor Maven. It's all about active travel these days, hopefully. Is there any more points or comments or questions? No? Okay. And with that, can we agree the recommendations at the bottom of page 148? Thank you. Thanks very much, James and Andrew, for that report. Thank you. Okay, David, it's over to yourself. Bonds and financial guarantee.
Thanks, Chair. I was a wee bit slow there. I was just going to come in at the end of the last one. I appreciate I got a good discussion. No, it was me. It was really just more for members' interest and to highlight that colleagues in all services do continue to try and find further and more innovative ways to address the overall carbon footprint. And in the course of the last few months, we were one of the first to sign up a contract. And I appreciate it's a small point, but it does all fill into the recycling, etc., with someone as a contractor to take away the coffee pods. So just to ease the conscience of any other caffeine addicts like myself that use those pods and don't just take it out the jar, we do have a contract in place for them to be separated out and recycled. So that's, again, just a small example of being one of the first, I wouldn't say cutting edge, but one of the first in Scotland to put that in place rather than them being treated with the general waste. And as I say, it's one example of many of our colleagues continue to try and identify those kind of opportunities. In terms of the bonds and financial guarantees, the first obvious point to make is I'm not Joe, but this paper, as is spelled out in paragraph 3, is an annual report required to be presented under Accounting Policy Bulletin 8A in respect to the financial guarantees. Members will know the origins of all of this, our current arrangements, including APB, and the Council policy position goes back to events in 2013 when the collapse of the open cast industry caused us to review all of our arrangements in this regard, and everything that's reported here flows from the decisions taken then in terms of how to improve monitoring and scrutiny and handling of all forms of bonds and financial guarantees. So the annual report sets out, well, the first few paragraphs simply sets out the context, what is required by APB and Council policy and all other relevant rules and regulations, the arrangements that are in place to make sure we're all properly held to account as heads of service in terms of our own management within respective service areas of bonds and financial guarantees, and a bit of information where we all sign our life away at the end of each financial year as part of the year-end declarations, confirming we have all done that which we are required to do. It then breaks it down into a number of areas. So it deals first with planning. Joe will not thank me for stepping in here, because the first thing I identified is the Appendix 2, because this report rightly refers to a related report that we take to the Planning Committee. The last one was the 25th of August, and there's one going up to the next Planning Committee next week, and that's on compliance monitoring update of major development environmental projects with a focus on the guarantees. Basically, Appendix 2 is rogue because that is a planning requirement. So when we go to the Planning Committee, we're reporting on all aspects of open cast, including the bond restoration position at fee on wind farms and the turbines, the quarries, etc. But the actual inclusion of the major developments in the planning report is not about financial bonds and guarantees. So those members that have scrutinised Appendix 2 will be wondering and will have already identified it doesn't tell you anything about any bonds or financial guarantees, because that's not its purpose in the Planning Committee report. And I think it's just been duplicated here in error, because it doesn't relate to bonds and financial guarantees. all the sites that are in that Appendix 2 for major developments, you will find in the roads bonds, because they're all residential developments, you'll find in the appendices relating to the road bonds position where the specifics are covered. So major developments is actually not relevant for the purposes of this paper, but the other 6 planning appendices referred to in Table 1 at Para 12 are and are included here for the full information. So what the paper sets out is the context to the different planning ones, and then the context to the ones held by ARA. Members are aware that's a different set of arrangements under the statute, under the Road Scotland Act 1984. And basically, if someone's building houses in an estate or a group of housing and they're having to form internal roads, then generally speaking, if those roads are designed and built to a certain specification, the council will then subsequently adopt them. The roads construction consent is basically to make sure that what they're building and designing and building will comply, and so we can adopt it. And the purpose of the roads bonds is to give us comfort that if they should fail in the design, and particularly in the construction, and if they don't deliver what they should have delivered, then if we should find any difficulties at the point of adoption, then rather than haggle with the developer to fix them, the point of the roads bond at that point is we can call that in and use that to make good any defects in the road before, or indeed sometimes after, we've adopted it. So that's the position, and they're set out as well. Just turning very quickly to the appendices, there's not a lot left in Appendix 1 in terms of the open cast. This is the last remnants of the few bonds that were there. From Well Hill down to Braehead, local members will know that's all effectively one large complex that was operated by Keir under the kind of banner of Greenburn. Credit to Keir, and I say this every time we talk about open cast, and I'll say it again, Keir at least stayed the distance. Keir have just about completed the restoration of all of their sites. They have cleared up their own mess, and they are now at the stage of looking for alternative uses. At the very early stages of looking for alternative uses for that site to avoid it being left as it currently is. They did all of that under their own steam and under the previous arrangements, which is obviously in stark contrast to the performance and approach of Scottish Coal and ATH, who trousered all the profits for many years and then bolted down the bolt hole or the rabbit hole of insolvency and left all their creditors as well as several large voids behind. So credit to Keir for, as I say, taking care of their own site in full, and they're coming to the end of that. House of Water's on there simply because it's just nearing final restoration by the developer as part of delivering the North Kyle wind farm, and they have completed because we've just released the last of the escrow. So that's a very much reducing report because there are very few historical bonds left, and as I said, members know that on the completion there of House of Water, it leaves Chalmerston. And Chalmerston, we have the money, we have bond money, we have Hargreaves money, we have FLS money, we have extra money for tree planting, and we're going to be bringing a paper to Cabinet shortly because there's opportunities on the works that have been done at North Kyle, rather than some peat being moved from A to B on the North Kyle site for us to pick it up when we get to Chalmerston and move it from B to C. We're going to get in early and have the North Kyle contractor or subcontractor move that site, that peat, all the way from A to C and spread it as part of the single operation, rather than run the risk of A, putting it in storage, or B, us having to pay extra for another contractor to move it part of that journey. The bottom line of all that is, as we anticipate being able to avoid or save £800,000 from that overall restoration pot for Chalmerston by doing that joined up working and moving the peat and paying for our extra movement of the peat now rather than deferring that later, and getting the benefit of economy of scale from using the Hargreaves Brockwell contractor. So Chalmerston's in hand as an aside, and that'll actually ultimately Appendix 1 will be gone because there are no new open cast applications, no new open cast sites, and there will therefore in the future be no new restoration bonds for open cast to be reported. Appendix 2, as I said, is major developments. That is there, as you can see from the content very briefly, that's telling Planning Committee about other aspects of compliance with conditions and consents of major developments, but not specifically financial constraints, guarantees, etc. And where they are relevant, most of these sites can be found, or all of these sites, I think, can be found in the relevant appendices, as I said, for road construction. Appendix 3, these are for the operational onshore wind farms, and that will be one that continues to grow. North Kyle will come online, Penclow will come online, Enoch Hill will come online. So that will be one where we've got more to report as more wind farms become operational. As the report sets out, when you get to Appendix 4 for the single and dual turbines, there was a point in time when, I think prior to 13, it might have been later, but there was a point in time where council policy, planning policy was not to require a restoration bond or guarantee for single turbines. But then that policy changed, so everything that's come in and been approved and developed since, there is a bond in place, but some of the early ones, that wasn't the policy requirement at that time. That doesn't mean that if single turbines cease to operate where there's no bond, they still have a planning condition and obligation to restore, and enforcement action could still be taken if they don't. But we now have, for the later ones, the belt and braces, that if they don't, we can call the bond rather than use enforcement action to make them fulfil their obligations. There's a lot of detail in the single and dual turbines, which obviously wouldn't take members through. Appendix 5 is simply giving you the up-to-date position in the quarries. And again, the key point for this report, for this committee, is the financial provision roundabout, being sure that if any of those quarries cease to operate, then we will have the means to make good the sites if they fail to do so themselves under their consent. But again, for planning committee purposes, there's a lot more information in there about the performance, etc. of the quarries. Appendix 6 is simply and specifically in relation to the interconnector project itself, which is obviously connecting other wind farms. Appendix 7 is just giving the up-to-date position in Garlaff, and we're continuing to work with BAR. Members are aware that that facility has ceased to operate, and in fact the council bought the waste transfer facility at Garlaff, and the operators are simply working with on the remediation of the landfill that we didn't take, that's still in their ownership, and that's still under operation with them and under review by us monitoring. And then you have from 8, 9 and 10, you have information on all the different roads bonds relating to all the current residential sites where ultimately the council will be asked to adopt the roads that are being built as part of those developments. And again, I wouldn't propose to go through the detail, but it is there for members' interest and information. And that's Joe's report, members and chair.
Thanks, David. I can remember the open cast days. It was scary. I didn't know you could dig holes that deep. Seriously, and big, massive plant machinery. And when you were looking down them, they were just like tiny wee spots. That's how deep the holes were left. It was horrendous, horrendous. But it's glad that that's all in the past now, eh?
There was many occasions, Chair, sitting down in the coal bunker when there was a desire just to get into one of those holes and pull the dirt over the top of us, but unfortunately the dirt wasn't where it was meant to be, so we didn't have that option. But 9 complexes down and 1 to go, and that'll be done as well. So we got there in the end, 10 years on. Aye, it's been a challenge.
Aye, well done. Okay, do you have any comments or points for David? No, so can we agree the recommendations on page 63? Yes. Lovely, thank you. And then we'll just move on to the final measurements and capital works contracts for the period 1st April to 30th.
I think the key word will be final, Chair. Yes. Members know this is just one of the suite of reports. It's a regular report. It was born from the fact we bring you the award of contracts paper, and one of your predecessors made the relevant point. As I said before, we get information around the award of contracts. We get some information around the capital works contracts in the EAP, but what about all contracts in terms of the outcomes as well? And therefore we started to produce this. So it is literally just telling you where we've issued contracts for works, where they've come in either up or down, and where the cost is greater than we tendered or awarded for, then there is explanation there. Very often, if it's significant, it's because we've added to the works because it made sense to do so. And there's one in there as a stereotypical one where the cost was based on 1 car hitting the bridge, and before the work started a 2nd car had hit a bridge, so there was a significant cost increase there, as you can imagine, but it wouldn't have made sense to bring in somebody to fix the damage, the second lot of damage at different occasions. So there are times it just makes sense, and there are times when it isn't. Oh, we missed that, we'll stick it in late. There are times when you just need to react to operational situations and make those changes for whatever reason. So it's all there in terms of the detail, and again, I'm not going to take members through it, but if there's any particular questions, we obviously went through it, the pre-agenda. They're all accurate, they're all presented as accurate and for information, and if there's any questions we can try and answer them or at least get those answers to you, but it's mostly for noting, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Any comments or questions for David? No, so we'll agree the recommendations on page 210. Thank you very much. Okay, so members will know December meeting's been stood down and the 2 items will be carried across to January, which means this is the final meeting for this year. So thanks very much to everybody for your contributions and input and your attendance. It's been first class. And the only thing left for me to say is to wish your families well over the festive period when that comes round. So thank you very much.
Apologies, Chair. Just, I forgot to speak. I was a bit late in to speak to you. Just to remind or make members aware that our colleague Stuart Nelson is retiring in December. This would have been Stuart's last committee, but unfortunately the personal appointment was Dad that he needed to attend to, so he couldn't make today. So it's just to flag up that Stuart is retiring. He'll be going just before Christmas, I think. And I think Christine has circulated an email. So it's just to make members aware that Stuart has indicated that if anyone were minded to make any contribution, any kind of gift from, he's actually directing folk, if they wish to do that, to Alzheimer's charity rather than the more traditional bottle, etc., etc. I don't think he's a big drinker. So that's why I haven't shaved today. This is my impression of Stuart Nelson, in case I was hoping you wouldn't notice he wasn't here. But bottom line is just to, and I will pass on, I know folk are grateful as the chair and the vice chair, and I am, for all of Stuart's work. And I'll stop now, because the more I praise the amount of work Stuart does, the more I'm going to put Lynn off from taking over. But it was just to flag up, Stuart would have been here for his last meeting. He doesn't want a lot of fuss or anything like that, but in your own way, I'm sure if any member wishes to do so, you'll pass on your own thoughts and thanks before he goes in December. But thanks, Chair, son.
Thanks, David. Thanks for reminding us. I definitely Mr. Stuart has been a huge support to me since I started this role, and I'll miss him, but I'm sure Lynn will come in at the back and just do as good a job. So thank you. Okay. Right, thanks, folks. Thank you.